Ladies, gentlemen, and non-binary pals, please give a warm welcome to the awkward siblings today on a very special and fun episode of Creative Recharge. With us today is Tom. Yay! And your hostess with the mostest, Lori. Woohoo!
It's going to be that kind of day, y'all.
Oh, God, y'all.
Look, we lost internet over the weekend.
It threw everything
You're
off.
lucky we're here.
Yeah. Maybe no one saw the intro.
You think so?
I can hope.
You got some strong hope there.
So, did you already set up the poll?
Yeah.
What is the poll today?
How strongly do you feel about the romance genre?
Daily reader / watcher, occasionally read / watch. When I have to with someone else, it's not for me.
I feel that pretty much covers the spread.
Tom? Speaking of internet problems.
It's going to be...
Yep.
Bear with us. We will do our best.
So anyway. Yes, Tom? It's incredibly awkward.
But, you know, like always, we thought we'd change up from previous ones to doing shorts this season so people could also watch with us and have, you know, their own things to say specifically about what we're watching. You know, because it's not always easy to watch all these movies we're going to talk about ahead of time.
Mm-hmm.
But, you know, these are 3 little shorts. And they definitely cover the 21st century ideas of romance. The modern questions. Which are also timeless questions, let's be honest. But a bit more open view about it.
Well, I think the romance conversation, or a conversation about writing romance, is pertinent not just to romance writers or people who wish to write romance, but also anyone else, because there comes a time in most writers' experiences when you're going to have 2 characters who are having a romance in your story, whether you wanted them to or not. And as a writer, it will go a lot smoother for you and be a lot less stressful if you have a clue. I mean, they'll still have a romance, whether you want them to or not. But if you have a little foreknowledge about the mechanics of romance writing and the tropes that are common in romance writing, it will go a lot easier for the writer, especially the writer, to plan out, to plot out, to revise. It will go a lot better versus feeling like you're winging it the whole time and kind of feeling erratic and out of control, which, while it may sound fun, it can be a very unpleasant experience for people when every day you go to sit down and you feel like your characters are running the show rather than you. And why does a writer feel that way? But because they're really only instinctively allowing the characters to play out their natural way, but the writer themselves has no idea where this is headed. No conscious idea. Versus if you're already familiar with certain tropes and also even how to plot romance, or what are the expectations for romance, what works in romance and what doesn't work, then you have a better idea of where is this romance going. Also, I like to point out you can have a romance between two friendship characters and it never be sexual. You can have friendship romance. Or as it's now called, asexual. No, and that's a little separate, but
No, I think what you're thinking of, aerospec.
aerospec.
A romantic spectrum of where some of the times they are entirely, not interested in any kind of romance. But other times, depending on the person, they may suddenly find they are romantically inclined. It's a spectrum.
So that was kind of our thinking about romance is a very common storyline. And we know it's common because it's been around for as long as humans have been around. We find it on cave walls. We find it in hieroglyphics. We find it in oral histories that date back thousands upon thousands of years. Wherever there are humans, there is romance. It's just something that we like sometimes. And again, like one of the ones I do love friendship romances. I love a friendship that develops. That is a type of romance. Or at least it can be.
Well, it goes back to the Greeks, for once did have a good idea that has panned out, which is that there's a lot of different kinds of love. And they have different ways of expressing themselves. Versus this nowadays Western civilization view of all love in the end is sexual love. Like that's the end expression of it is always going to be sex, which is kind of weird. Versus there's a lot of different kinds of romance, which is love. Because it's that caring how someone else is doing. It's not necessarily how, it's not always that selfish kind of love of how they make you feel. Sometimes it's also that love of you want to make sure you will feel better as long as they are doing better. So yeah, your pursuit and goals are to have them have a better life.
So yeah, that is what we're going to talk about today. And we're going to talk about 3 specific short films because these films in particular I felt made excellent analogs for short story writing, so that there's a lot we can glean from these 3 short films that we as writers can glean in regards to writing short stories. And of course, specifically, we're going to talk about writing romantic short stories for this, but it's not necessarily the whole thing, and we'll talk about that. Like, it may be that this is a romantic short story within a greater non-romantic story. But you can still write, essentially like a chapter, if you will, in this romantic story. And we will actually go into that. That's one of the things I wanted to talk about, because technically all 3 of these films really are like they could stand alone, but they also could be part of a much larger story. So, and just to reiterate, the links for the 3 short films are down below. There's Orange is Bliss, or it may be Bliss is Orange. Maybe I got confused on the title. And there's a link to it.
That's why there's links. There's direct links to go watch
We
them.
did the direct links. There's Main Squeeze and there's 2 Doses. If you haven't watched them, I would honestly love to recommend that go watch them. And then come back and catch up with what we're saying. And you could even, what is it? There's a way to change the setting that this plays at like 1.5 speed or double speed.
Yeah.
To catch up if that's what you want to do. As I said, all 3 films are quite short.
Yeah.
So, so first we're going to talk about Orange is Bliss or Bliss is Orange. I don't know. Orange is Bliss seems like the better title to me. So, but I thought I noticed during watching the film the other day that it said Bliss is Orange, and I'm like, hold it, what? Or it may just be my dyslexia, and I was having trouble actually seeing because it was like a script font. Anyway, that's a whole nother matter. So hey, we're about to spoil all 3 stories, which is again why I'd recommend go watch them. Go watch them and come back. In the meantime, let us go through and say hi to everybody. Eva came by to say hi. Hey there. It'll be another bit before I can hang out, but doing a lurky bit. Hello. Thank you for lurking. CB is here. Hello. Megan is here. It's like I just saw you, dear. Tom's in the chat doing double duty because he knows I like to say it. Megan says, my response to the poll, I have very specific requirements for my romance. And Megan's also letting us know that the ads she saw at the start of the live stream was StreamYard and Wix ads. And she missed our technical difficulties at the beginning. Oh, I'm so sorry. CB says her mom lost internet for 2 hours yesterday, and her mom is like, what, an 8-hour drive from us?
Yeah.
If I recall correctly. So yeah, there just may have been problems all over. Because one of the internet backbones actually goes through our town. We live in a very advantageous place.
Technically 2 of them.
2 backbones. They diverge, don't they? They split off.
No, they're side by side. They're parallel. It's a convenient location.
Well, there's a reason our town is called what it is. Megan says, I like romances like Cyrano and Pride and Prejudice and Jane Austen in general, but they tend to have social commentary with their romances. I think rather most romances have social commentary, or at least the ones we really like have a certain amount of social commentary in it, because the characters do not live in a petri dish. They don't live in white space. They live in a world. And in that world, society dictates things. CB says, I read romance fanfic sometimes, but I'm very particular about pairings. Same in TV shows like Agent Carter, for example. Darn it, I wanted Peggy to end up with Howard Stark. I just wanted Peggy to continue on with her show.
I just wanted to continue. I liked the friendship she had with Howard. I liked that, you could see that Peggy still hadn't finished grieving losing, what is Captain America's name?
CB would know.
Can't believe I've forgotten. But, she still wasn't finished grieving him. And you could tell that, and that was fine. But she still had, this good friendship with Howard. And showing that...
time.
Yeah. And showing it wasn't... it's not that this weird thing of men and women have to always end up together in a sexual relationship. Steve. Thank you, Steve Rogers.
Thank you.
Instead, that you can have just friendships. You can have a romantic friendship where you care about each other.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, Howard definitely cared about Peggy. And Peggy, did care about Howard, but she also thought Howard was still really a cad.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
And so you got this friendship of equals, this peer friendship. That was a nice change.
Mm-hmm. Yes. I agree. And I enjoyed seeing that friendship develop. So, do we have anything else to talk about before we get into?
Didn't we all love that? It was
really was asking for it.
It had been built up over so much time just to finally, yes.
Is there anything else we have to talk about before we get into the meat of this? Oh, if you're having a good time and you would like to support the channel, could I recommend subscribing, clicking that notification bell so you know when we post new things? We occasionally post non-live stream things. And also sharing this video and other videos of ours that you like with your friends and on social media. Hey, also, did you know we have memberships available with emojis that you can use on other YouTube channels? You can use our emojis that we upload to other YouTube channels. So that's pretty cool. So there,
as well as on our Discord.
As well as on our Discord. Just need to do a little plug there. And so anyhow, so Orange is Bliss. Where should we start, Tom?
On Orange is Bliss, where do we start? For me, it was an interesting one in that it has all the elements I want in a short story. I do not like the way they played it out.
Megan has already given me an earful about it earlier backstage.
Because for me, it's that whole when we see a story we enjoy, we want to feel it's interactive. And the way we get most of our information in Orange is Bliss is passive background information. And I like the potential for how we saw it, but where we ended up getting left at the end of the story, again, is this classic problem of don't make your watcher have to figure out what the character's thinking.
Mm-hmm.
We don't know. Like the way they actually played out the ending in Orange is Bliss is that, but this is a very still uptight religious society.
Well, I thought our system was a compliment, a criticism, a compliment. And you've just jumped into the criticisms.
I know it's a hard.
I thought these were it's hard to undo our parents. Anyway, back to.
So, but I love the concept. I thought it was fun.
I liked it because it was kind of sci-fi without actually requiring a whole lot of special
world building.
Yeah. Here is the sci-fi part is there's one new kind of tech that's not in our world. And I thought they did a great job of explaining the tech in a conversational way between two characters.
As well as a lot of background images showing with little phrases about the different colors to give you a sense of how people viewed those different types of matches.
I liked it that it was a lot of exposition, but it didn't feel like exposition. It felt like these are normal conversations these characters would be having with each other. But also explaining it to the audience. What is different about this world? So I very much liked it. I also liked just honestly the way the two baristas can just talk their conversations. I liked their chemistry. It very much felt natural, very similar to my own experiences of working in, retail and food service and everything. It felt very similar. So I really liked that. It worked for me. Obviously, I like a little sci-fi. I also, be honest, one of the things that frustrates me where I live, this area I live in South Mississippi, sci-fi is not popular. And in fact, everybody says, oh, no, I don't like sci-fi. Like, as if it's a personality trait or some crap. And I liked this because it's romance, but it's like sneaky sci-fi.
I did like also that part where it is, you could definitely, at least I thought that this was a story concept that people often have this conversation of, I just want to know whether someone is worth dating or not. And that the sci-fi is, what if you could know? What would it change? How would it change your world?
Mm-hmm.
You still don't, know how to search them out. It's still random coincidence to meet them.
Mm-hmm.
But at least, is this someone who would be a good personality match?
Mm-hmm.
I mean, it does take a lot of guesswork, and it's still like, well, how would society work then? which is what sci-fi is about, which is philosophical questions.
Yes.
And so, yeah, it did a really good job of sneaking in that sci-fi.
I like that.
And using that as the pedal for accelerating or slowing down the story.
Mm-hmm. Well, I like it because, again, I encounter so many people who say, oh, I don't like sci-fi, or I'm not a sci-fi person. And I would be able to say, but you like this one. You told me, you thought this story was really interesting. That's sci-fi. Which it is. It's sci-fi. I mean, it's also a romance, and yes, you can have both. You can have sci-fi romance and romantic sci-fi. You can have all of it.
And it also shows just how much sci-fi and fantasy really are two sides of the same coin. This could just as easily be a fantastical setting instead of a sci-fi type setting.
It could be a rune implanted in your wrist. It is the same thing as it is. Come on. It's especially when it's not hard sci-fi, then it really is very similar to soft magic and soft sci-fi. And there's nothing wrong with that. It works. And I think also people, sometimes I hear criticisms of soft sci-fi. Oh, it's not hard sci-fi. I only read or watch hard sci-fi stories. And again, I just want to point out how soft sci-fi and soft fantasy are more generally appealing to general audiences.
Mm-hmm.
It is a wonderful way to get people into a genre that they may have thought wasn't really their deal. Because, for instance, I know so many people that hard sci-fi, such as Star Trek and Star Wars, these stories don't appeal to them. Maybe because they're not into philosophy that much. They are not into what they see as these, very disjointed philosophical questions of, but how do we live? But instead, but we all like philosophical questions. So, because Origins Bliss poses the question, what if you found the perfect match for you? And that other person also acknowledged you both are the perfect match for each other. And then they still went off with someone else. What does that mean? Do we really want the perfect match for us, or do we want the comfortable match for us? So these are philosophical questions, but often these kind of questions are not what people hear as philosophical questions. So they think they don't like philosophical questions because they're not hearing these kind of philosophical questions, which many people find much more relatable. These are more like emotional philosophical questions. And so again, there is this idea of, well, what is a philosophical issue? Oh, it must be utilitarian philosophy, good or evil, rather than, do you really want to find the perfect match for you, or do you want to find the most comfortable match for you? A lot of people think they want the most perfect match, but when offered a perfect match in a packaging that they were not expecting, people will go with what is the comfortable match, the safe match, the predictable match, what they know they're getting into. So these are philosophical questions, but these are often not posed as philosophical questions, both to general audience or to anybody. And so people start, again, labeling their personality like, oh, I'm not into philosophical discussions, like it's a personality trait. And again, it's like, no, more than likely you are into philosophical discussions, but the discussions that have been raised around you are not appealing to you.
It's just like any, horror is moral philosophical questions.
I think ultimately, as human beings, most people have an interest in philosophical questions. It's just finding the philosophical issues or discussions that appeal to them. And often what appeals to them are things that are directly relatable in their own life. So deeply personal philosophical discussions.
So, like with romance, it's always about relationships. And there are so many philosophical questions about relationships and friendships and romance and what is acceptable and what's not acceptable per person, not even societal, but just on an individual basis.
Mm-hmm. What I also liked about Orange is Bliss is in the ending, there is essentially another conversation jumping off point. And that is, what is your definition of a perfect match? Is it necessarily sexual? Or could it, in fact, just be two personalities that are just a perfect match for each other and it's not sexual? So you're a perfect match, but not sexually. Is that then a perfect match? Would you define that as a perfect match for you? What if you found the perfect person for you, but your sexuality does not match their sexuality? Hey, to mama. So what if that happens? Are they then perfect, even though your sexualities don't match? Is it still a perfect match if it's just friendship? Like, maybe what we're defining as what would be an ideal match for us is not actually, as we haven't filled out the whole image of what is perfect for us. And we're like, well, of course, no, sexuality is a part of our idea of a perfect or ideal match. But is it? What
And
if
also,
you had a friend who was a soulmate, but obviously you did not feel sexual about them and they didn't feel sexual about you? Are you really soulmates? There are some people who told me then they're not a real soulmate, and other people say, no, soulmates are soulmates, period. I think this is a really important kind of discussion to have, which you can have in romances, of what is a soulmate to you? Do you even really know what you're looking for?
and like one of the questions that really is posed, but again is left unsaid. So, again, you are kind of looking for your audience to piece a lot of things together in the story. But, like, at the end, because earlier we hear them talking about how the Pope is going to officiate the only other green match, that anyone's found so far. Because, obviously this is, from God, but what if it's a match that the church is not okay with? Would everyone still be so happy about it if it wasn't such a heteronormative match? And that's also what we're left ending with, is this making things easier, or is it actually causing more problems? Like, is the reason why there's only been one green match officially
Mm-hmm.
because all the other green matches are not societally acceptable?
Mm-hmm.
And what would you be willing to do for that? I mean, often that is the romance question, is like, how far are you willing to go for romance? How much do you need it? And so it does make a good question. And yeah, these baristas do make a really good sounding board.
Carrie says soulmates are soulmates. You find that person that you just connect to. I would say my best friend is my soulmate. We're like sisters. My sister and her best friend are the same. But, like, rather than just, this is what I think, which, of course, I also have mine, as writers, we can then illustrate this in a story for our readers. It doesn't mean our readers will necessarily agree with us. And it doesn't mean you can only write what you believe. You could write a story that plays out against what you think and then see what people think about it. It's something to talk about. And quite honestly, if you'd like to get known as a writer, then you probably need to write some short stories that people want to talk about. That people want to essentially, so the ideal story, whether we're talking short or long, the ideal story is a story where somebody reads it and goes, oh my God, I need people to talk to about it. And then they socially peer pressure their friends to read the story so that they then have people to discuss it with, who then are also equally like, oh my God, I need more people to discuss this with. So they then recommend and peer pressure other local people or other friends elsewhere to please read this so that we can discuss this further. And that is the ideal story to get known as a writer.
I saw this really expertly like pointed out on a Folding Ideas one where he was talking about this movie. Of course, I've forgotten the title of it now. But you're going to you'll know your friend watched this movie because they're going to say, now you have to watch it. And they're going to harass you till you watch it. And it's about this genius little kid who, finds out they have cancer. There's some problems going on in their neighborhood. Namely, he thinks the neighbor's kid is being, hurt. But the parent of this kid is, the local sheriff or somehow in charge of the law enforcement. And so he leaves directions for his mom of, after I die, here's how you can kill this guy and get away with it.
Oh my God.
And it's such an odd story, but it is one of like, everyone will want to talk about this story because it's such a weird story. You'll know your friends watch this because they're going to harass you till you watch it. And that's a lot of stories. I've over time we have, Gloria, I've talked about how many friends we've had who are like, have you read Wheel of Time? And it's like, and how do we politely get out of, no, I'm not interested in reading Wheel of Time. But it's so fascinating. You have to read it. I just don't have the time right now for it.
Well, the reason we try to get out of it is we know enough about Wheel of Time to know we're not interested in Wheel of Time. Like, nothing against the TV show or anything either, because we've been literally dealing this like 20 years.
And we understand, it is it's a fun ideas, but that's just it. Of like, you get these ideas that people just want to discuss. They want to discuss with everyone, especially anyone they're friends with, because there's a lot to digest and go over.
Yes,
and that's where why Wheel of Time has succeeded so well, even though it is such long books for the average type of story. Like, these are huge tomes, but they're filled with such interesting ideas. People want to read it. The same with Game of Thrones. There were so many interesting ideas. People wanted to talk about it.
I know at one point, this is now a couple years ago, but I remember, so there's like essentially, there were a couple readers at our library system that were really into Wheel of Time. And, everybody's got internet here now. And so several of them, well, two of them talked to me about, have you ever heard about trying to read all of Wheel of Time? Like, how fast can you do it? Like audiobook or book, either way. And I'm going, no, how long does that take? 2 years? They're like, yeah, that's probably the average. But there's like a challenge at one point on the internet of like, can you read all of the Wheel of Time series at that point? Which I swear was 17 books, in less than a year. To which, when other people come in and go, I love Wheel of Time, they're on like, I don't know, book 7. I don't know. I'd be like, have you heard about this challenge? And I'm like, just felt like absolutely a devil. Like, just, hey, but have you tried to read it all in a year? They're like, oh my God. Oh my God, that'd be like all of my free time. My hobby would be, and I'm like, yeah, apparently some people do this. And again, like, even Wheel of Time lovers are like, hey, Mickey, that is a lot of personal time to devote. I mean, I get it. You know, Carrie says you're describing me and Charlie with Gilded Age. Absolutely. Megan with Cyrano. Yes. My desperate efforts to get people to read Cyrano de Bergerac or watch the movie. That is the ideal. Is that you write a story and readers read it and then they desperately need to discuss it with other people and they are able to get friends and family to then read it to discuss, but those friends and family liked it so much they want to now discuss it with other people as well, and so this continues on.
And
That
we saw that as well, way back with the Matrix. When the original Matrix came out,
yeah,
people wanted to discuss the ideas implied in this story.
Oh,
and
how
Fight
about,
Club.
I remember the late 90s. It was, have you read How Stella Got Her Groove Back?
Oh God, yes.
And what'd you think?
How everyone discovered the, what was it called, urban romance section in the bookstore?
Yeah. Well, it wasn't how everyone discovered it, but...
Well, no, it's just everyone says, have you read this book? And it's like, where is this book? I haven't seen it. And that's how they discover, wait, there's a separate section?
Yes. So, there are plenty of books like this. And I got to be honest, for the ones with the widest appeal, it's often a book with a romance or a story with a major romantic element. Which is why I bring this up. There are many good reasons to hone your romance writing craft that are not to appeal to strictly romantic readers. There are many wonderful and excellent reasons. And one of them is romances are easier to dive into for general audience than other types of stories. So it's not to say you can't have a romantic horror. Laura was just telling me about one of her stories, and I'm like, that sounds great. And it was definitely horror and romance, so fun twist. Or, again, sci-fi romance. Carrie says, as I'm sitting here refreshing HBO Max waiting for episode 4 to drop. Yeah.
Give him the next hit.
Or romantic fantasy. Every genre you can add romance to, because as long as you have humanoids, you can have romance. Actually, non-humanoids. Let's be perfectly honest. I was always waiting in Ender's Game series for the bugs to have a little something. It's very disappointing. Can we not have two hives? What is two hives having a romance between each other? I'm fascinated. Are there gifts being left? And they never went over it, and I was disappointed. At least not that I may have dropped off before.
I was going to say, I can tell you some stuff that happens later on that is weird, but it does kind of go over how romance looks different in different species because of expectations.
Mm-hmm.
But I mean, I was just reading that story from Alice Hoffman, of the the Practical Magic prequel, what was it, Book of Rules of Magic?
Yep.
Where it's not labeled a romance, but that's really what all of these stories are about that take place in this book with all these different characters. Is how do you have romance when your family's cursed to always have a failed romance?
Mm-hmm.
How do you overcome this? How do you still, and it poses a lot of interesting questions about it. And how do you succeed against the expectations of romance? When you can't have what you're told is the ideal, what do you do? And you still find your way to get everything you need out of romance in your friendships and relationships. And so it's still good, but yeah, it's not labeled a romance because there's not a, happy for now or a happily ever after.
Mm-hmm.
It's a, more realistic, this is how you live with romance, and then when it ends, and how it continues on in your heart.
Mm-hmm. I love the romances between two friends, and then they're parted at a certain point, and then they finally reunite, and they're just talking. Oh my God, I miss you so much. I know me too. I have so much to talk about. I love it. I'm like, yes. I love those, and no kissing is not required. Oh, it drives me nuts. Not that it's not like I don't love the whole friendship to romance trope. I do actually enjoy that one. But it should be foreshadowed from the damn start. It should not be, this was fine in book 1. They were just friends, and now all of a sudden they're stooping. I've learned that on YouTube I can curse in other languages. I just can't curse in English. So
Going the Robin Williams route?
Yes, so apologies to those who speak Yiddish and are offended. I know, I don't. I look sorry, not sorry. Anyway. Like, I that is definitely why I recommend plotting out your whole story for your characters ahead of time. And if you think there's even a possibility of pushing that story further, yeah, I've found the loophole. If you'd like to send me curse words in any other language, please, everybody, feel free to DM me all your favorite non-English curse words and what they mean. Also, tell me which language, so that I can have Google say it to me so I can make sure I'm pronouncing it correctly.
Should I go bring out some of the ones I've learned from Army people?
Whatever. I'm open.
I mean, Vietnamese has some interesting curse words.
But yes. So, that is what I think is, if you're just writing a short story and you're like, I didn't think this was ever going to go further, so I didn't foreshadow anything. That's not what I'm talking about. And again, I want to point out, I say things like, this is what I think. I think we should all, as writers, da-da-da-da-da. Does that mean that if you didn't do that, or you did the exact opposite, that I'd be like, tisk, tisk, tisk? No. I don't care. You know why? I am not your mother. I don't care. You do you. Also, play fast and loose. Do all the things I say not to. Be successful, and then tell me I did the exact opposite, and here I am, and I will still applaud you. But I also would like flowers or a muffin basket. So Megan says, I'm tempted to write a romance because there's something I just don't enjoy about most contemporary romances. I think that is a wonderful reason to write a romance. Write a romance you would like. Write a romance you want to read. And I really mean that of every genre. If there is a genre you're like, I have never found anything in this genre I like, or I've hardly ever found, like horror or sci-fi or inspiration or whatever, then go write something in that you would want to read. Also, I think it's really good for the brain to get out of your comfort zone and think in, how do I write a genre story in a genre that I don't normally think in. And I think it's really useful for the brain. It's a very good exercise to get out of that comfort zone. You're going to make cross connections that are really going to be powerful, and you're going to benefit from long term. It really is good for people's brains to do that.
And but to also just write out those situations that, again, that you're annoyed at the way it always tends to play out classically. And you're like, but that's not my life. That's not the life I've seen. Like Gloria and I were talking over the weekend, or maybe a little bit before the weekend, about friendships we've had that people assumed were sexual, because, for both of us, because it was with an older person of the opposite gender.
Mm-hmm.
And it's like, no, we really got each other. We just, it wasn't quite soulmate, but it was close enough of just this friendship where you could just be yourself and the other person could be themselves, and you just liked visiting and chatting and, knowing this person and having him in your life. Everyone else, though, is like, oh, obviously they have to be stupid.
Including their children.
Yes.
We're so sure. And it's like, hard pass, no. Also, your parent is married to your other parent.
Yeah.
I'm not. What?
Nor am I trying to replace, any of the kids either. It's
yes. Oh, that was like, well, if you're not having sex together, then are you trying to replace one of us children, or be added to the family? And it's like, we're just really, really, really good friends. We get along in a way that your parent doesn't get along with pretty much anyone else who's alive right now. can it not just be friendship? But actually, for both my relationship, my friendship I had with someone, and Tom's friendship, it was a romantic friendship. We truly were friends, but you know, there was still gifts and there was like little adventures together. So I guess technically they were dates. But again, it was never sexual, but it was a friendship that truly did cross time because of this major age gap of like finally I've met somebody who like thinks like I do and enjoys a lot of the same things I enjoy, and then I can show them things that they're not familiar with. I love that about being friends with somebody who, was almost as like was like no, was yeah, they were about as old as my parents. Um because he had so many things to show me from that he knew about growing up that I, as a younger person, had never even heard of. And then I had so many things to introduce him to, like technology. At any time there was some new technology he heard about, I'd be like, Glory, I've heard about this technology. Can you show me next time we get together? And I'm like, absolutely. I shall be prepared. Like it was so wonderful to have that. And while there just really, there was no sexual tension at all. We were just best friends and it was wondrous. And his family just absolutely was so sure it had to be sexual. Like they could not interpret it another way. And I honestly was hurt by it. He felt bad about it. I'm so sorry. I've tried to explain it to my wife and all our kids because they were a blended family. But everybody is so sure. And I'm like, what is this about? Also, I was married at the time too. I was like, yeah. Like, and my husband was always kind of like, but is she? It's like, because they could not interpret it any other way. It had to be sexual. And that was so strange to me. I guess as a demi-romantic, why does it have to be sexual? Can you not just have a wonderful meeting of the minds? Of two people that, like, I don't know that I would say soulmates, but we definitely got each other in a way that hardly anybody on this planet has ever really understood me. And it was lovely.
But yeah, again, is it just because we're demi? But also, and sort of, so were the other people we were friends with. Because I know both of the people we were friends with, were married, and I know they both still had an active sex life with their spouses.
Mm-hmm.
Like there was no question. No one else was even questioning that. But there's other things you want in your relationships, in your friendships. Like another thing that often gets forgotten is this 20th century really came up with this idea of how your spouse is supposed to be everything to you instead of just one component of your life. Kind of like I love the analogy for movies of when movies started, actors just needed to know how to emote. That's what they were great at. And that's what, they could do well.
Mm-hmm.
And then they got talkies. And so now they need to be able both to emote and to speak well. And now we want them to, and then, started the musicals. And so they now need to emote, to act, to sing well. These are 3 different skills for a person to practice. They're not part of the same set.
Mm-hmm.
They are all different. And now, with Marvel, and they also need to be able to do action stunts as well.
Yes.
As act and sing and emote.
But
if you want, they have to be the complete package. And it's not always possible.
And if you're in action, you also have to know how to run well.
Yes.
There's schools for that.
You now have to, and then you have to be able to do so much physical performance and acting, as well as emoting and speaking.
Mm-hmm.
and all this, and looking the part. The spouse is the same situation in the 20th century of, it went from the person you set up a house with and you raised kids with to also now your emotional confidant, your best friend. All these extra components as well that used to be recognized by society as, you had separate people for these. Your spouse was not necessarily your best friend. That was a separate person.
Yeah.
They were not necessarily your emotional confidant. That was not necessarily even your best friend was your emotional confidant. That was a different person.
Yes.
But we've now said, no, it has to be the same person, which implies that if they are any of these, then they also have to be sexual. And that is a weird view of the world. And, so again, so we like to see a change in this idea about romance. Of, what if your perfect match is not necessarily the person you want to marry? What if they're just someone you want to spend the rest of your life having friendship with?
I would like to think in Orange is Bliss that the one person comes back another day or keeps coming to that coffee shop to run into the barista again. And then they have a conversation. I would like to think that they at least have a conversation and get to know each other a little better. And maybe even if you are a perfect match, it still is like a slow burn. Where you figure out, how does this person fit in my life? Perfect may be perfect, but where does perfect fit? There's only one way to find out. Go back and get another coffee. So that's what I would like to think. But again, that is, the headcanon is there because they left it so open-ended. But with short stories, it is okay to leave stories open-ended. You don't have to have a happily ever after or even a happy for now. You can leave it open-ended, and people do seem to be more okay with that. Particularly if you're planning to kind of revisit this story later.
All right, it's about
I just
time.
think it's a good exercise for writers, quite honestly.
I'm going to finish the poll for this one just to...
Okay, so are we about ready to go to break?
Yeah, I think so.
You know what? Now's a great time to make sure you have something to drink, y'all.
And if you want, you can go watch, the next one. What is it?
Main Squeeze.
Main Squeeze.
We're going to talk about Main Squeeze next. So, hey, here's a thought. If you haven't watched it, maybe now's a great time to watch it. And we will see y'all back here in approximately 10 minutes. Maybe a beep. Maybe a beep. Maybe a beep beep beep. Boom. Come out wherever you are. Hello, hello.
No, again. Enjoy the new questions.
Oh, did you put up a new poll?
Yeah.
All right, let's see. Favorite romance story type: true romance, Princess Bride; romantic comedy, To All the Boys I've Loved Before; romantic thriller, 50 Shades; romantic drama, Titanic.
The movies are just to kind of help you figure out what type of genre that is. Because I realized when I was writing romantic thriller, a lot of people are not going to immediately think of like, what is a romantic thriller? So let me give you an example.
So here we are.
Ah, yes, Main Squeeze. I know this is definitely one for you to talk about because it's about modern polyamorous relationships. And it definitely has some interesting aspects to talk about for writing. Now, the poll should show up for you.
If you're not seeing it, refresh your browser and see if it pops up then. What do you have to say?
It's like, unlike the first one, I like that in this one, in this story, you don't have to try to figure out what is in the main characters' heads. We get them to speak it out loud. I like the argument they have at the end of showing what it is they both are trying to avoid by having this polyamorous relationship. That this is not what they're literally playing out like they're kids playing house of this is what the bad form of relationship would look like that they don't want. Let's just say those words so we can, then say, no, this is not what I think. This is not what I am feeling about you right now. I like that part. They don't make you guess about motivations. It's all there.
I do like that because since so few people are polyamorous, or at least I'm told are, or at least have been in polyamorous relationships.
Let's be honest, functional polyamorous relationships.
Yes, functional polyamorous relationships. Since so few people have that, it is important to assume the general audience is not familiar with like the inner workings of polyamory or even the inner workings of the mind of people who are polyamorous. And so they don't leave you to figure it out for yourself what these people are thinking. The characters say their thoughts to each other. And that is very helpful. Again, because so if you have characters who feel romantic or sexually in a way that is not mainstream, i.e. cisgendered, heterosexual, then I think it can be beneficial to have the characters say their inner thoughts out loud to each other, or at least in a internal monologue. Hello, Nia. So that there's no question. Why is this person in this relationship, or why does this person want to be in this relationship? We know why, because all these characters have stated their thoughts.
The other part I really liked and appreciated in this one is the pacing. It's not that we have times when no one's doing anything, which is the part that, oh God, 60s and 70s movies editing and some in the 80s, like really just, why are we still here?
Oh, Tom, how about the 1930s movies?
Yeah. versus
So
no,
much
no.
just silence of just
Yeah.
ambient sound. Ah.
But like instead we have the characters doing things, but they're not saying anything, so that us as the audience has a moment to think about what we just heard them say and do. We have a little bit of time while the story's going along to process what's going on in the story. After each little bit of info, after each little scene between different characters, we then see them doing things, which does add a little bit to the story, but also gives us that breathing space in our minds, kind of like in writing, where you are now describing the environment or you're describing what they're doing. Yeah, it gives you a little bit of details, but it also gives your reader and just like your watcher time to think about where is the story right now? Where's everyone's motivations? What do I think their emotions are?
So, first off, hi, Cherry Panda. I'm so sorry you got notifications late. I don't know. But you're here now, and we're happy you're here. So one of the things I liked about Main Squeeze is that essentially they took the concept of flavor text. So what do I mean by flavor text? It's the descriptive type. So it would be the equivalent of Paula got up and went to the pantry to find Sherry's favorite Band-Aids, the ones with the little fishies on them, from her favorite cartoon character, and also some triple antibiotic ointment and maybe some gauze or alcohol to clean it up. And while she searched the pantry for these things, she really thought about how frustrated she was that Sherry would throw a sex toy through her window at night while she slept. And how immature Sherry really is deep down inside to do this on Christmas night or Christmas Eve, whatever. And like it's that kind of flavor text. You've all seen that before in stories where it's like a paragraph of descriptive, maybe two. Purple prose can be part of it. So here is the useful part about flavor text or purple prose. Most of the time, these kind of descriptive text do not require the reader or the audience to really think heavily. You're describing the scene, you're describing maybe the internal thoughts of the character, if that is the writing voice you're using. What is it? Third person omniscient. But what it really can do, though, what you can use it for, is it gives the reader some breathing room to think about what they think about the scene they just read. So character A said this, and character B replied, and then character A then volleyed back, and then character B had an excellent, argument back of why that argument is invalid, da 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 da. And so it gives a little bit of breathing room to the reader to think about, well, what do I think? While they're reading, descriptions of the curtains or whatever, or what's in the pantry, oats, cereal, where are the Band-Aids? It gives the reader a couple seconds of breathing room to think about, but really, why would it, in what world is it okay to throw something through somebody's window while they're sleeping, Sherry? Of the reader to then form their own opinion, so that they then go back to when Paula goes back into the scene, because I don't actually remember the characters' names. I'm so sorry. Y'all know I'm bad with names. You thought it was just your names? No, it's everybody's names. It's character names. I'm terrible with all names, period. So I don't think either character's name is Paula or Sherry, but these are I literally pulled these out of the air. But when Paula goes back in with the Band-Aids and the whatever, alcohol or something, then the reader has kind of formed a proto-opinion. And so then the reader then reads the continuation of this scene, right? Of Paula and Sherry and, I don't know, Bill talking. And so then we give the reader, after a couple more little thought bombs have been dropped, we then they go to another scene. There's more flavor text. And that again gives the reader a moment to think about, okay, what is my opinion based on now what everybody has revealed?
And the The
And how,
real
like, Sherry has now, like, shown that she gets validation from sexual performance, and how that really is a rather immature view of relationships. Versus Bill does not value sexual performance over emotional connection. And so we really see these, like, two lovers are kind of on different ends of a spectrum. And so we kind of see, we have a better idea of why is Paula into both of these people and how she cares for them and why she still cares for them. Even when one of her lovers has done a major transgression. Because I don't know about y'all, but I consider breaking a glass window in a winter night, in what I looked it up, they filmed this in Canada, it's cold. Like, that is a major transgression. That's not okay. Plus, with a sex toy? No. That's rude. That's just rude. So,
and a really massive object at the like.
so I know.
She is
The thing is, we used to sell this product. I know how heavy it actually is. You can make someone see stars if you hit them in the right spot on their head with this thing. It is heavy and it is solid.
Like, did the younger girl, did she like play softball or something? Because you got to have an arm to do that.
Well, I guess that's that whole thing about, the inebriated don't know their own strength, maybe. Maybe it's like that.
Yeah.
I have no idea. I'm impressed. I like to tell myself it was crappy old windows. They were not double glazed for sure. That's what I'm telling myself. Because I do not know how you break windows on, like, a second
Yeah, the
story
second floor.
or 1.5, because it actually looked like it had a half, like, lowered basement, or whatever you want to. Anyway, doesn't matter. I'm not here to talk about architecture. So, for those who've joined us, again, we're talking about the short film Main Squeeze. The link is down below. These are all short films that we're discussing today. And in fact, we'd love to recommend, I know, like, normally it's supposed to be a no-no that you say, hey, stop watching this, go watch the shorts, and then come back and just watch it on 1.5 time or double time. But yeah, I'm neurodivergent. I apparently don't know how to be a normal person. And I've given up now. It's been too many decades of me trying and being unsuccessful. So I'm just going to say it. Like, we'd love for you to watch the short, at least Main Squeeze, to join in this conversation. And the next hour, we're going to talk about 2 doses. So, if you want to get ahead of it too. So they're all short films. They're all very short.
And okay, but to getting back though about, so why do you want to give your audience this breathing room to think about what's going on in the story?
Yes.
And it gets back to something we've talked about before that a lot of writers don't think about. Well, new writers. And that is the reward system people have for predicting what happens next. You want your reader to get rewarded for kind of guessing what's going to happen next. But to get rewarded, they have to first think about what's going to happen next.
They have to make a prediction.
Yeah.
To then possibly get a reward. And if you don't give them time as the reader, if you don't give the reader time to make a prediction, then they don't get a reward. It's just that simple. So what you got to do is you got to build into your story breathing space. And one of the very easy ways you can do that is by putting in some flavor text where you simply describe the scene. You describe the room. You describe faces. And you, instead of doing it like one line of describing the face and then what they then said, and then the next line of describing the next character's face and then what they then said, instead of doing it that way, which is one way to do it. And again, we're not trying to tell anybody, oh, there's only one way to do something. We're just offering these ideas up. Instead, what you do is you take a paragraph and you describe the room. You describe everybody's faces. And then the conversation, so that the reader knows what the room is. Meanwhile, they're going to be thinking about what was just said right before that, and they're going to be then making their predictions. They're going to first decide what they think about it. And then they're going to then make a prediction of what they think will happen next. And that's what you want to do. Ideally, you'd like to, whether we're talking short story or long story, you'd like to give readers an opportunity, if not every scene, if preferably even multiple places in a scene, to make predictions about what's going to happen next, so they get those little dopamine hits. Tamama says, yeah, accurately guessing plot twists are approximately 85% of the fun for me. Exactly. Okay. You and like most readers, like, and when I say most, I mean like, I don't know, 90, 95, 98% of readers. So we want to build into our story, whether we're talking short or long, we will want to build in little breathing spaces, so to speak, where you then, describe things, but that kind of buys the reader a couple seconds of time to really decide, well, what do I think about this? And then what do I think will happen next based on what has happened before? Megan says, I used to read the last page and then try to figure out what happened as I read along. Exactly. So
yeah, like I'm one of those people who I don't mind spoilers because it's still a game of like, all right, where do I think this will show up and how do I think they got to that point?
Mm-hmm.
And also sometimes spoilers helps tell me if this is the kind of story I will be interested in.
Mm-hmm. Megan says, not knowing what happened would give me too much anxiety.
Because, like, one of the things I told Glory when I was listening to Rules of Magic is that, well, there were definitely aspects I thought of the story I think she would enjoy. Let me first finish it to make sure that the ending is satisfying and not a very frustrating ending that will just sort of, give this, why did I even read it? I wasted some of my time on this because the ending was so not fun. This one was fun though, so it's like, yeah, okay, go ahead and listen to it. I think all of it'll be fine for you. But that's why it's like, yeah, I'm not recommending till I finish it to find out first of like, is it a complete story? Love Cherry.
Spoilers just give you a reason to watch. I mean, and I understand people who are not into spoilers at all. I get it. Like Eva. Eva says, I love going to films without a clue. The blurbs are usually a spoiler for books for me. In the way that I read to figure out how it works out to fit the blurb. Imagine going into Squid Game without having a clue. It's going to be a surprise. So that is one of the things that I very much liked about Main Squeeze is there were several spots that while they seem like nobody is talking and nothing is happening, in fact, there's a little bit of things happening, but where they're actually put in as a pacing to give the viewer, the audience, a moment to think about what just happened or once they realize confirmation of what just happened before we go into the next part of the scene that will have more revelations in it. And it's done regularly throughout this short film. And that was one of the things I very much liked about it, is especially since it's about a polyamorous polycule. It's not going to be something that the majority of people are necessarily familiar with or familiar enough with to understand the inner workings of a polycule. So having these little moments, these quiet moments, and they're not that long. They really are the equivalent of a paragraph or so when you're reading a short story. They're quite short, but that they're just like this little breath moment that you can take, and that is all that's necessary for the audience to think about what just happened, what they think of that, and then what do they think will happen next, or what will happen soon, and then watch and keep watching. So when we think about that, what there is, when I talk about hooks, that is another kind of hook. Because when we give the audience a moment, we're talking about whether you're talking about something visual or we're talking about the printed word or audio story, it's all the same. when we give the audience a moment to think about what just happened, what they think of what just happened, and then make a prediction of what they think will happen next, that is a type of hook. Because if you don't keep reading or watching or listening, how will you know if you were right? Aha, do you see it? There it is. That dopamine, you can't get your dopamine kick if you don't keep reading or watching or listening. So, I really thought Main Squeeze was an excellent example of writing a story, whether we're talking romance or not, of the pacing of it. So there are these little breathing spaces for that. So I'd really like to encourage you, even if you've already watched it, maybe even to rewatch it later, with that in mind, just to observe these little spots where nobody's really talking. And it's in there not just in the editing, but in the filming of it too, because sometimes they're just honestly just looking at each other. But it's just for a moment. It's not for that long. It's not like French long. And
Danish,
so
very Danish.
the Danish.
How long can we milk this scene?
Staring at each other. But it's just enough for the audience to think about what just happened. Did I think just what happened? It did in fact just happen. And then what do I think will happen next? When will they then talk about it? What's going to happen?
And not just that, I also like the part of how they use relatively small amounts of words to imply a lot of information. Instead of doing, like long info dumps, they use these little phrases to give you clues about their personalities and their reasonings behind things.
Well, we can make a compare and contrast in how that is different from Orange is Bliss.
Yes.
Orange is Bliss does a big old exposition info dump. And the way they do it, though, it still works out pretty well between two characters, the two baristas, having a conversation explaining this sci-fi tech and how it works. Cherry says, this is why I have trouble DNFing things. What if it picks up later? Or is it just bad the whole way through? Yes, agreed. Probably why my TBR is 3 miles long. Mood. Oh, I will rewatch a movie / reread a book until I can recite it, says Tamala. Yes. If it is good, or if it's interesting, or if it was definitely one of those I couldn't put down, I'm so much more likely to reread or rewatch. If there's something I feel like there's something for me to learn or to observe again and again, I will rewatch or reread, trying to like pick up more or see it in a slightly different light to get a different angle on it. Because I want to understand. So I liked Main Squeeze on the surface. It's about a polyamorous, little polycule. And it's so rare for me to see one at all, let alone one that's functional, with a rather dysfunctional member. But when a polycule is functional, that is not dependent on everyone being functional. It is dependent, the functionality of the polycule is dependent on essentially the majority of people, or at least some key players, trying to behave in a functional manner. So, number one, I found it refreshing to have any kind of romance that involved polyamory, since I myself am polyamorous. Also, that it was very accurate for polyamory. It was not, I really felt like how it was written, it was at least very well researched polyamory wise. And that was refreshing since it's so rare. And the film itself was pretty well done. The editing was tight. Again, where there's these little breath breaks, but they're not too long. They're not so long you're like, time is passing now. They're just long enough to, again, as I said, what did I just see? What do I think is going to happen next? And so I was very impressed with this film. And I feel like there's a lot we can learn as writers, whether you're trying to write romance itself or you're simply, trying to become more familiar with all genres, so that when it comes up in your story writing, you're more familiar with how to write, in that genre mix. Because as I said, you would be surprised how many writers have told me that they had two characters start a romance against the writer's desires. Like, it happens enough that it's like, do you understand these people are in your head? So if they're doing something that you don't want them to do, there may be something missing from your education as a writer. Because intuitively, this feels correct to you. But intellectually, it's not working for you because you don't want that. Why don't you want it? Is it because you're unfamiliar with this genre and so you're kind of struggling? Hence, yes, here we are. Trying to go over the basics and just sort of toe dip into anyone can write romance, and it does not need to be strictly more traditional romance. Kind of makes me sad that the vast majority of romance that I come across is cisgendered heteronormative. Even when it's queer stories. But it's honestly just they change the skins. They change maybe the gender of one character, but yet the character is still acting in a very stereotypical way for the heteronormative thing. And it's like, why? Why this be this way? When surely you as the writer have enough experiences with romances that you know that all romances are not heteronormative.
I mean, I always love the question that shows just how much cishet is indoctrinated into people. Was a coworker I used to have, talked about how an aunt of hers, was in a lifelong relationship with her roommate. And then, once it passed that they could marry, they got married.
Right.
And the question everyone else in her redneck family had was always the same. But which one is the man in the relationship?
This person that Tom is talking about, not the aunt, the coworker Tom had, even asked me, but Glory, don't you ever wonder who is the man? And I'm like, number one, how is it any of my business? Number two, why does there always have to be a man? And she just could not make sounds out of her mouth for 8 minutes? It was a very long time. The brain was broken. And I was like, Tom, hand her a lemon drop. Have her drink a cocktail. Maybe the brain will get started again. I felt bad, like I've broken her. You mean there doesn't always have to be a man? Just stares and queer.
I mean, it's the same thing we hear a lot in modern relationships of, to use the truly awful F word, feminism, of these gender role expectations of, but that's the wife. It doesn't matter whether she works or not. Her job is also supposed to be the one to cook and clean, isn't it?
And
that's not part of the male roles.
Her job is also to raise children.
And to raise children.
And if there are no children, then she is raising the pets. Right? She's the one who has to take off work to go take them to the vet, not him. So who's the man? Who's the one not taking off work to take the animals to the vet?
I'm like, why are these gendered? Why are these roles gendered and separated? Why does it just have to be one person who does all of these?
Yeah. I can't tell you how many times here in South Mississippi I have been essentially dragged in various ways into a conversation with other people trying to figure out, but who is the man in that relationship or who is the woman? And I'm like, that is not necessary. And I say that as somebody who used to be married to a man. Guess what? It wasn't necessary in my marriage either. Ava says, I'm stay at home and the Mr. takes off for doc appointments. Definitely genderless parenting here. I wear the pants, but she tells me which ones. Or some corny line like that. Yes, Eva. Like, it has come up so much that I'm like, why is this like a tagline here? Like, but who is the man and who is the woman? Like, there is not.
It's one of the things I do enjoy about, the current conversations the last decade, and especially like Reddit.
I'll tell you what I'll just tell you in case you get involved in one of these, somebody like drags you into this conversation and you're like, how do I escape? Wait, Glory told me the line that's freed her so many times from this terrible, awful conversation. I will tell you the one, this is the phrase that pays. Just in case you ever need it. Here it goes. They take turns. That is my line. Anytime somebody's like, but who is the man in that relationship? Or who is the woman? The answer is they take turns. That's how I exit the conversation, and it has successfully worked literally dozens, if not actually hundreds of times now in the last, 15, 20 years?
Yeah.
Now, is that actually accurate for the people I was talking about? No. I was just trying to escape a conversation that it's like Zen. It's like you could meditate on this forever and you may reach enlightenment before you figure out the truth. Because the answer is there's no answer. So the answer I always tell them to escape the conversation is they take turns. How often do they take turns? All the time. All the time. But how do they know? I'm like, probably rotate days. And let me tell you, it just keeps shutting down the conversation. Mwah! There you go. Just remember when you're like, how do I escape this very uncomfortable conversation I'm right now having? Glory told me. What is the phrase that pays? They take turns. Cherry says, that's the weird thing, to the point that we have such an outdated hetero media representation that even if queer people are in a straight relationship, all of a sudden they have to fit that stereotype.
Yeah. I am so old.
So tell us about what it was like, Grandpa.
I remember when like the depictions in the media in the 80s of gay relationships was this very confused, no, there's still one partner who wears the pants, and at home the other one literally wears the dress as the wife. Of like, it was still heteroized, these relationships of like, they couldn't grasp what do you mean there is not gender roles in this relationship? But that's how humans function, isn't it? No, that's just what you've been told. It's a shorthand. It's not a requirement.
Mm-hmm. Now, if you too are tired of these weird, antiquated heteronormative ideas of relationships, like I am tired of it, and Tom is tired of it, may I suggest practice writing romantic short stories where that shit doesn't happen. Try it out. See what you think. You might find you like it. Or you might find other people find it thought-provoking and it inspires them to write as well. Or you might find that you can then reuse those stories later in your regular stories that you like to write. And you can like take some little bits that you practiced in writing, non-heteronormative romantic stories. Cherry says, I'm honestly so tired of straight couples in media. I know, me too, honey. I'm straight and I do not have a miserable, nagging, settling relationship. So tired. It's so tired. It's tired, like it's old and dusty. Like, how does it fit anyone anymore? It was constructed for people with a different body shape, kind of tired. Like, how is this going to fit anymore?
What was that joke I heard recently on some, I don't remember what show it was, like Saturday Night Live, Trevor Noah, something, or maybe it was a comedy stand-up about like bad women drivers or something. I'm just like, this joke is so old.
This joke is so old. It had to like, what was it? Oh, wait, I heard a bunch of them. This joke is so old. It had to ask their husband to open up a bank account for them so they could get a credit card at JCPenney's. This joke is so old that it used to not be able to vote in the presidential elections because it didn't have the right back then. This joke is so old that it still thinks it was a conspiracy to sink the Lusitania. This joke is like I heard a whole bunch of these about women can't drive. And now there's a reason it turned out where this was. Like there's always a grain of truth in that, and that was that they've actually found for any and all genders that, and they're not entirely sure why this is though. The quality of a new driver definitely is related to how many generations back of their same gender people have been driving in their family that they were raised in their family of origin. So let us say that you consider yourself a young woman and your mother didn't know how to drive and her mother did not know how to drive. So you're the very first person of your gender in your family to learn how to drive. Your driving is definitely going to be more problematic than a young woman in a family whose mother had already learned how to drive before she was born and whose mother's mother had learned how to drive. That young woman will be a more skillful driver and have far fewer accidents for her first 10 years of driving. And ditto for men and non-binary people and all of it. It turns out it has to do with the people you relate to gender-wise in your own family and their experience of driving and how long they've been driving.
And the same answer for why do we now, in the last 40 years, have this stereotype about women being poor in math, has to do with most teachers are female, and a lot of teachers weren't taught very well how to do math. And so they see their own gender in school being poor at math, so they take this internally. They also show that boys, if their teachers were male and were not strong with math, had the exact same effect. Even though 60 years ago and back, women were considered the better mathematicians for 100 years.
Yeah, women were considered late 1700s and through most of the 1800s, women were considered far superior at math. And in fact, that is where we get the term computers, is how many computers you got there. They were talking about how many females you have in your office to compute mathematics. That is where that phrase came from, of computing. And now we have machines, but it used to be your female mathematicians were called computers because they can compute anything. Hello, Maggie. How are you, dear? I saw you just come in from fixing fences. Metaphor or literally? Literally. Oh, the cows want to live with the goats and be spoiled. I mean,
it's goals.
Yeah. So, as I said, there is a grain of truth there, but it is no longer true. It is also actually where the whole idea of certain people, there used to be this terrible stereotypical joke about people from Asia in America were not good drivers. And it turns out that is also why are some people are more accident prone. And they found first generation drivers, period, but exclusive to their gender, no matter their immigration status, their ethnic background, or their gender. It has to do with how many people of your gender had that skill before you. That it has a lot more to do with your skill. Now, my father's theory was it's only because, especially like in American society, the time we spend with young people is gendered. So mothers tend to spend more time with their daughters and fathers tend to spend more time with their sons. So my father was determined that I nobody ever say, oh, damned woman driver in reference to me. So he started teaching me how to drive when I was 8 years old. And I'm not kidding. Like he started it in arcades. Oh, I could always get some quarters out of dad if I was going to go play the driving games. Because he really wanted me to practice. Yeah, that's right. Cruising USA and California Cruising and all those. And so my father first had me practice quite a lot. And he would be there watching me play and giving me tips. And he also would play it too to get better at the game, to give me better tips. And then the go-karts. I don't know if anybody remembers the go-kart games. like you could actually like go out and like for a couple dollars play a couple rounds on these physical tracks driving, I don't know, the equivalent of souped up golf carts. And he would also be there with me, or he would watch me and then give me tips and then like pay for me to do another, couple rounds to see my performance and like, gently critique. He was never rude or mean, but he was just like, okay, when you go around that curve, this is how you do it. You're going to go fast and then 2/3 around the curve, take your foot off the accelerator, but don't hit the brake and see what happens. But Daddy, I'm going to crash. You got your helmet on, remember? And the guy told you how to crash. So if you roll, don't worry. Because this was one of those where it was safe to roll, relatively speaking. But I had a helmet on and I had like that whole cage thing over it. So he's like, I took you here. We drove all the way out here in case you roll. I want you to try it. And he was right. I did not roll. I did not crash. Y'all, I've gotten so many compliments on my driving. If I do so myself, Tom even complimented me before because I was like yelling at him, fussing at him for like a solid 20 minutes while I raced through these very curvy back roads. And I did it in record time because my father was like determined. No one is ever going to call you a quote, damn woman driver. And so he spent, essentially 10 years teaching me how to drive, even though I had a great deal of anxiety when I was getting a little older and needed to like actually start driving. And he just spent so much time because he's like, we will not have this anymore. He really hated hearing the misogyny of this. Eva says, my mother and I took motorcycle riding lessons together. She was in her 60s. It was a wild time back then. But we just wanted to point out, like, this gendering is ingrained in the heteronormative experience. And it's not going to get better on its own. It's just not, because people don't even question it. So how will it get better? We're going to write stories, y'all. All of us. We're all going to write stories. And we're going to inject maybe a little romantic element, but it's not going to be just your normal boy meets girl, man meets woman. It's going to be something different.
And again, it doesn't have to be gendered roles. I mean, that's actually what we'll be getting into the next hour as we talk about two doses. Because it very much is it's not gendered the way you think it's going to be. But then the problems of if you grow up in a gendered society, how do you react?
So what I do like about Two Doses is there's a peanut gallery in the story. So you can manage the peanut gallery reaction in your story, and it's a really great plot device for that, particularly if you are trying to tell a different kind of story rather than the normal cisgendered heteronormative type romantic interaction. So it is another wonderful way to manage the reader's reaction. So again, they're happy with the story and then they want to share it with other people. So yeah, that is was there anything else we want to talk about main squeeze? I'll tell you personally, just watching it the first time, I just wanted to yell at that one character a whole bunch. I mean, it's like, nah, we breaking up. You too immature for me.
True. But on the other hand, I do like the main squeeze also showed a lot of the, instead of always writing as we've seen the last 2 decades in this negative, oh, this is how the world is. Maybe write it aspirationally of here's how I want people to act. Like we still see this character who is absolutely, beyond embarrassed of the situation going on, still coping as best she can, and just trying to handle the moment. And the I will work on the rest of it later. But here's how how she's acting in the moment in these relationships to, to get through it in a way that she stays true to herself. Of, it is sort of aspirational without anyone realizing it. Of, she does still care about this other, romantic partner who is drunk and belligerent and embarrassing and just not someone you want to admit to anyone you have feelings about.
I mean, I definitely, especially on second watch, see these characters more through the other character's eyes and see why she is, she's definitely speaking up for her boundaries, but she's not about to like send the one who threw something through the window, send her out into the cold.
Yeah.
And I see that compassion more the second watching, and I was like, it is very sweet and wholesome. And I think that was how I originally told you about it. Was I have just watched the most wholesome, romantic polycule story. You need to watch it. I like last summer. I think that was how I actually introduced it to you. Was it is so wholesome. Normally, if it's a polyamorous story, it's salacious, lascivious, or just straight up dysfunctional. Like it's always as a cautionary tale or for sexual gratification. It's never wholesome and sweet. And this one, while it had plenty of conflict, it wasn't puerile at all. And I was very impressed with that because
nor is anyone actually the bad person.
No.
It again shows that you can have conflict without anyone playing a malicious role.
Because I really like seeing it through this more compassionate lens. I really saw how the young woman who threw the toy through the window, she was just in a bad spot emotionally. She felt
isolated.
She felt isolated. That's it. I was like, how do I say it's, she felt isolated, which it was nobody's fault. Like she just was at a party with her friends. They were all exchanging gifts, and she wished her partner, or was there. Her girlfriend was there, and she felt isolated and didn't know how to express it and made the wrong choices. Anytime you break in other people's windows to get their attention, you're not making good choices.
Especially in the middle of the night.
In the cold in Canada, right before Christmas. It's not good. And, but it was also nice to see that the other person in this polycule, the boyfriend, was also being compassionate, despite, again, the cold and the middle of the night and, the vandalism of this is a person in a bad space emotionally. And they need compassion, even though they are saying things they really have no business saying out loud. And it was so wholesome to see how everybody, the other two, the people living in that apartment were trying to be compassionate, but also trying to be honest with each other. In that relationship, it was just like, oh, you never get to see the functionality part. That's nice. So rare. So I very much enjoyed that. I honestly was surprised that was as far as the story went, and that because I was like, where's the sequel? Where's there more? Is this not like
a series?
Something, yeah, some Canadian show? Degrassi goes to college. I don't know. So that was like my main disappointment, was like, this was it. And as far as I could tell, this is all that's been done. Granted, I haven't researched it in many months. So that was like my main of, oh, there's not more, which is a really good thing, I think, for audiences to feel like at the end of your story is, but where's the more?
Yeah, I've been enjoying seeing all of the Imager memes about the Super Bowl halftime show and all the elder millennials, and everyone keeps using the meme from I think what was it, episode 7 of Star Wars with Kylo Ren just going, more.
So yeah, that was it. Now we're gonna go to break. Again, how is everybody's liquids going? Do you have something to drink? Is it snack time? When we come back, we're gonna talk about 2 doses, and then we're gonna also talk about everything like we've learned from these short films and applying it to short stories, as well as I believe, Tom, you've still got, or have you ended?
I ended.
You ended.
75% went with True Romance. Princess Bride for the win.
True love. So we will be back here in approximately 10 minutes. See you soon. Bibbidi beep. Bibbidi beep. Bibbidi beep beep beep. Boom. Come out wherever you are. Well, here we are. I have questions. What is a glass cake? Is that called Jello? Jello cubes surrounded by condensed milk Jello. I know I've seen that in Asia.
I'll say that makes me think of certain ingredients for halo halo, namely nata de coco.
Yeah. Yeah. Or that, what was it, that Chinese one that is like, it's called like something like Cloud Island or something, and it's got all these colorful Jello cubes like nata de coco in a sea of like a sweetened condensed milk pudding like thing. You know what I'm talking about? Laura got a handwritten letter from her sister. Aw, very sweet. And Tamama is speed watching 2 doses.
That's the way to do it.
That's how you do it, babe. Hope everybody gets squeaky voices.
Speed watch through the cringe moments.
Carrie says, hubby came home with Peanut, so I helped get her dinner. Came back mid-sprint. Very nice. Excellent work. Okay.
So here we are.
Mama said it hit different places, entirely non-romance related. Yes, there are cultural stuff going on.
Oh, yeah.
And it's actually like a very enjoyable way to touch on these. To touch on these cultural integration, non-integration situations that are real and honest. But like, I remember the first time I watched that short, afterwards I thought, I could write like this. I can write these kind of stories. I live these kind of stories, including the then telling of the story to other people while they drink tea or coffee or whatever.
And give peanut gallery responses.
Yes.
I mean, I love when one of his friends, responds with a, 1 out of 3 ain't bad.
Yes.
And I think it was, what was the response to? I think like tall, dark, and handsome.
One
Like, out of 3 ain't bad.
Yes.
I'm like, there's friends for you.
That's friends, yes. So to be able to talk about like so there's layers and layers to 2 doses. It is on the surface a romance story of a first date that did not go well. But at another layer of it is the issues with being a first or second generation immigrant or second generation of an immigrant family and trying to assimilate, but not assimilate too much. What is the just right amount to assimilate? Which we could definitely relate to with our mother's side of the family in particular.
Why didn't we bring up our favorite childhood game of doesn't everyone play growing up?
Are you talking about the Cossacks are coming, or are you talking about a different
Yes.
game? Oh, okay. I wasn't sure because there's like a couple of doesn't
Yeah.
everybody do?
And to say, like, I still remember the look, we both got occasionally of like, doesn't everyone play this childhood game?
Apparently not.
Oh, it's sort of hide and seek.
It's a kind of hide and seek that's kind of intense.
Don't get found no matter what.
It's called The Cossacks Are Coming. And no, it turns out no one else in all of Mississippi apparently plays this game.
For anyone wondering, what is the origin of The Cossacks Are Coming?
Okay.
May I
have actually written an entire Tumblr post where I went over the 3 variations on this game that my mother taught me as a toddler. She started playing this game with me when I was 2. And that I then turned around and played when I would babysit kids. And, oh God, the trouble I got into once.
But for anyone wondering, like, what is the origin of this game? There is a movie by Steven Spielberg called An American Tale. Go watch the first 10 minutes. That's the origin of The Cossacks Are Coming. Those are the Cossacks.
They're portrayed as cats. They're Cossacks.
Well, no, actually, in the beginning of the movie, we see the actual Cossacks raiding the village, and then they bring the Cossack cats to go terrorize the mice.
Hats.
Yes.
They're wearing little Cossack hats. They're like, they're cute, but also deadly. They're murder floofs. Yeah. They're genuine murder floofs. But yeah, if you're watching, the non-TV version of American Tail, because they usually cut that out, especially the Cossack part, the actual human part. It's the only time you see humans, or it's one of the very few times you see humans in the original version of the American Tail cartoon, is the very beginning. And normally for cable, they cut it out.
It is
apparently
intense.
Eastern European Cossacks got real mad about it. And still get mad according to their websites.
To which, we respond of, I ain't seen you apologizing or welcoming people back that you murdered and got rich off of. So, nope, you get it. You get to keep it.
Or raped.
Yeah.
So, sorry. So the game is The Cossacks Are Coming. And you could be doing anything and everything, normal household things. Mommy's cooking, y'all are watching TV, but anybody can shout, the Cossacks are coming. What is supposed to happen? And there are certain rules. Like if you're not an adult, you can only say the Cossacks are coming during certain time periods, like, when it's okay. Like you have to clear it with the adults first. But you can say, the Cossacks are coming. And then everyone has to stop what they're doing and go hide. And no matter what they hear, you have to stay hidden. So if you hear like your mommy going, oh no, help! If only someone would help mommy. Mommy has fallen. Oh, someone is trying to get in the house. Whatever you hear, banging, whatever, you can't come out. If you come out, you don't win the game. And then somebody, usually mommy, or whoever's in charge of this game, will at a certain point, 5, 10, 15, 20 minutes later, yell, the Cossacks are gone. Okay. When they're very little, like toddlers, they come out after whoever yelled Cossacks are coming tried to find everybody. And if you're found, you've lost. But if you're not found, they yell, the Cossacks are gone, all clear, you can come out. For toddlers, if they come out and they weren't found until then, it's like, well, where did you hide? Ah, good job, you won. But if you're a little older, if you're not a toddler, if they yell, the Cossacks are gone, you come out. You don't come out. You have to hide. You have to stay hidden. Because they have to still find you. And no matter what they say, come on, dinner's ready. You don't come out or you lose. You get dinner, but you lose. And Tom's the ultimate winner of this game, hiding, 7 hours?
I think something like that.
He came out in the middle of the night and got his food. And yes, he was crowned the ultimate winner He will not die by the Cossacks. And that is when Tom won. That is how Mom told us the actual point of the game is when the Cossacks come, you don't come out no matter what. You don't even come out when everybody says. You let us go find you.
It was by the way, this was a 2-bedroom, 800 square foot house.
You
They
would
still
be
couldn't find me.
amazed where if you are little, you start figuring out where can I hide. Yes, when you need quiet, you can declare the Cossacks are coming and get at least solid 10, maybe 15, 20 minutes of quiet time. You know, it is a wonderful way to not yell at children. I will say that. Which is, you know, one of the ways you do it is like go hide. Essentially go take a quiet little, you know, a timeout, a 5-10 minute, maybe 20-minute timeout. Everyone will calm down. You go sit quietly in your little hidey spot. Oh, we all had multiple hiding spots because Mom was pretty good at figuring out hiding spots, but she did figure out some of them. I had a really good one in the hamper.
No, you want the hiding spot no one ever looks in?
Top of the closet.
Huh?
Top of the closet.
Nope. People look there. If you are a small person or a not terribly big person, most regular couches actually have the backing padding is actually not flat against the back. It's actually attached much higher up to create this push forward, and for the seat cushions to slide under. You can actually fit behind that couch padding, and no one looks inside a couch.
Hell, even when they sit down, they won't feel you.
Nope.
And the way the top cushion is built, often they're not going to press too far in to squish you too much. My personal favorite used to be hiding behind dressers.
Oh yeah. No one really looks behind dressers
Because see, your feet will show at the bottom of the dresser because some dressers have little feet, little legs. But if you can find like some wood, like a plank or two, anything that will make it so that when you stand on it, your little toes don't show. If you hide behind the dresser, people will not notice, particularly if there's stuff on top of the dresser and you're behind, so it kind of hides your head. They did never think to look behind the dresser. And I was a chubby kid, and people still didn't notice, you know, a little bit of space the dresser had. They just didn't notice it. So that was another really good one for us.
Yeah, don't forget, we were chubby little kids.
We were chubby little, all of us. So back behind blankets in the linen closet is another really good one. Like you figure it out. Like if you keep practicing, our little sister she got surprisingly good at hiding behind in the cupboard under the sink, bathroom and kitchen sinks. And it was pretty amazing because you're thinking, I'll just open the cabinet and I'll see you. But she came up with some ways to obscure. And so she got quite good at it. But you don't get good at it as a little kid unless you practice. The Cossacks are coming. So we would play this at least once a week. And we would play it just the three of us at home too. That is how our little sister ended up in the dryer that time that we've told that story a couple times. It was one of those where she was hiding and, you know, you don't come out even when they say all clear, they have to find you. And she was of that age. And so she was still waiting in the damn dryer when I opened the dryer, didn't look, and threw the wet clothes and turned it on. And she was like, "Stop, I'm here." Because she didn't say anything when I threw the wet clothes, so I did not notice her. I thought those were just clothes in the dryer. And I figured they were rumpled, so I was going to throw the wet laundry. I'm here. And I was like, oh, the dryer has talked back. Yeah, so anyway, it worked. She had grabbed some dirty clothes and threw them on top of her when she got in the dryer and then closed the door. And so it just looked like dried clothes in the dryer. It did not look like a little girl was in the dryer. I dried her. Glory, I'm here. So, yeah, it was, and that was a game we grew up playing, and it was only when I was much older, I was a teenager babysitting, and I was playing this game with kids I was babysitting, and then kids love this game. It is a fun game because it's not over till you're found.
And it's a
So,
creativity game.
yeah, because how can I hide where no one will find? Like, it's a very fun game. And then, of course, they're like, with their families going, what are we going to do on a wet Saturday afternoon? It's raining outside. And it's like, let's play the Cossacks are coming. To which, yes, there were several phone calls to my mother. What is this game? We looked up Cossacks in the Britannica. And wait, what? We have questions. So, but it can be useful. Like, it is a sad thing, but I'm going to tell you now, you're going to wish a little kid knew how to hide. And it'll be too late. So, I think it's a good game to teach little kids. Grace, did you also look? Most little kids are not that good at figuring out hiding spaces, so it's also good. Like, you critique. Like, there are places you don't hide. Do not ever hide in the oven. Was like one mom had.
Do not hide in the fridge.
Do not ever hide in the fridge. And the only way you can really teach it, like, you could tell little children, don't ever do that, but trust me, they will not remember in the moment of, I need to hide. Where will I hide? So you have to then catch them doing it and then teach them not to. They'll remember it better that way. There are places you never hide. You never hide in the fridge. You never hide in the dishwasher. You never hide in the oven. You don't hide behind the oven, for that matter, or behind the fridge. There are places you do not hide. You do not hide in the septic system. This came up when I was babysitting.
But look, you're not the only one who, tempted to try their sibling.
Yes, I feel better. Laundering your children's. There were a lot of questions. People got upset. Some people did not ask me back as babysitter.
Especially the ones who, had Cossack ancestors. Did not think this was funny.
Mom's point was, this is something that came up from my, family from immigrating to America. That's who used to raid the village. It wasn't, it wasn't the Huns. Okay, lady? That was what Mom said. Like, it's not like the Huns were. Okay?
But you do have, as being, the child of immigrants, and even the second generation, you have these traditions brought over from the old country, and you're not ever sure how entirely to integrate it. And that's really what the two doses is about.
Yeah, because the whole thing with the cutlery. Should you eat with your fingers or should you use cutlery?
And he literally in there says, my dad said everything has to be eaten with cutlery. Even, what was it? Some kind of biscuits?
Yeah, it was some cookie. Some kind of, yeah. Like, you don't eat anything with fingers. And the issue is not what is the answer for that. The issue is how assimilation is not smooth. Integration into a different culture is not smooth. And you never, Weetabix. Weetabix is very large shredded wheat, Tom. Yeah. Like I said, it wasn't like the Cossacks will kill you. It was, although what would happen if Mom found us was, it was tickles, is what you got. Okay? Like, she wasn't like, now I beat you. I'm a Cossack and I beat you. It was, tickles. Mommy gets all the tummy tickles. And yes, she would blow raspberries on our tummy if she caught us. Or whoever was, playing the Cossack. So my little sister used to love to yell, the Cossacks are coming! So because she wanted to go find us, so she could blow the raspberries on everybody's belly. Because the game wasn't over until raspberries blown so that you lost. Or, you wait till everybody's forgotten about the game and you sneak out and you go, I have won. So anyway. Cherry says, the U.S. is the only place I've been where people identify themselves by other ethnicities. Talking about people who have been there forever, not third generation or something. Yeah.
There's more people who identify as Irish in the U.S. now than there are people in Ireland.
Yeah, Grandma Marty thought that was so odd. And she was like, what? third or fourth generation from Northern Ireland, and she was
Mhm.
like, "I'm not Irish. I'm American. They can't make me go back."
Which, believe me, after seeing the genetics there, I don't blame her.
I asked Mom a couple years before, like she's passed away 10 years now, but I asked her, "Didn't you like think that maybe that's a weird game to play?" And she said no, partly because when you play the game, you find out the hiding places each kid would choose so that if they ever are hiding because they're hurt or they're scared, you know where to look. Because that's how kids end up, lost in wells and stuff, is you find out where their hiding spots are so you know where to look in case, because when children are hurt or scared, they're going to go hide. So you need to figure out, like, you need to know ahead of time, all of your children, where are they likely to hide, where are their favorite hiding spots. And also so you can critique them, like, don't hide in a well. No matter how scared or hurt you are, never go in a well. It's hard to get children
As you
out.
point out to them, how are you going to get out?
Yeah, that was Mom. Mom, I remember that when I was like 2.5. Mom, I got I got stuck somewhere. It was like under a table, I remember. And she's like, "How are you gonna get out?" I caught you, but how are you gonna get out? And I was like, I didn't think about that. And she's like, "I'm gonna sit here and eat your favorite snack till you figure out how to get yourself out."
Torturing you. Just torture.
It was strawberry cake. I still
So
remember.
rude.
I'm still salty about this because strawberry cake was my favorite cake as a kid. And she was like, "You better get yourself." And I would start crying. She's like, "No, there's no crying. You have to figure out how to get yourself out. All right, if I give you one piece, one little bite, okay, will you stop crying? Maybe. You have to promise, no more crying. You have to figure out how to get yourself out. No crying. You have to calm down. Figure out how to get yourself out of this. You are stuck." Now, granted, later I was like, "You knew how to get me out, right?" She's like, "Oh, this is how I would have gotten you out." She told me. And I was like, "Then why didn't you get me out?" She's like, "Because you have to figure out how to get yourself out. Because if you were ever hurt or scared, you're going to go hide somewhere and you need to be thinking, how do I get myself out of here later?" Again, the problem with children in wells, in ovens, and refrigerators. This is, you've got to figure it out. So that was, Mom was like, "I was aware Cossacks were never coming in America. They were never going to be raiding people's houses." She's like, "I was aware. But it was like how I was raised. That was the game. That was what it was said. But also, like, you need to know how they're going to hide. You also need to help critique how they hide, where they hide, so that they understand." Yeah, because now it would be the police. The police are coming. The media encourages us to divide ourselves, but then acts like those who are of real minorities never really suffer from racism or oppression, and assumes all people of a skin color or bloodline have the same culture.
Versus, you want to see different traditions, just go to Thanksgiving at everyone on your street's house. They are not the same.
Not the same. So, like, but the thing is that is what I liked about Two Doses. It is about, there's layers and layers to this story.
I love the response. Like, I want to say the top comment was explaining but the white girl's not speaking perfect Hindi.
Mm-hmm.
And the answer is, that's because he doesn't even know what Hindi sounds like. He
Right? He
says
doesn't
that
know.
in the movie, he doesn't even speak it. He just has to assume she is speaking it perfectly.
Mm-hmm. Yep. Mm-hmm. So there's a lot of layers there in the story. Romance is a type of story, a genre that you can have social commentary. You can have philosophical commentary. That is entirely possible in these. I also liked the comedy of it. It is definitely a how things can go wrong. This So you have expectation and then you have reality each time. And how it goes wrong, how he thinks it's going to go, how it then goes, which is not what he thought was going to happen. And versus how she reacts each time.
And we see just how much he is shadowboxing with, this other guy she once dated, Vinay, and he's never just there with her. The moment he finds out that there was someone else who was how he self-identifies as being different, all of a sudden he's now shadowboxing with that person instead of, all right, let me be my true best self and see if that's the person she likes.
Mm-hmm.
He says, like, I'm kissing her, but all I'm thinking about is, but how did Vinay kiss her? How am I comparing to Vinay? And the answer is, it don't matter. Vinay ain't here. You're the one there.
Right?
She's kissing and smiling at.
Vinay left her to go to Edinburgh. He was like, yeah, thanks, but no thanks. And he left. What she cares about, what matters to her is he is here now. And, she's open to kissing. Right. So.
She's not upset by his interest in doses. She's not upset that he hasn't tried this stuff before or that he has a poor reaction to the beetle nut.
Mm-hmm.
She's not upset by it. It's just him.
Mm-hmm.
He's overthinking it.
He's not really present in the moment on this date. So, but what I like about this story is it works as a standalone story, but it also would work as an introduction to these characters in a much larger story. Now, does this introduction therefore does this larger story have to be a romance? No, it does not. It just is a very nice way to introduce these two characters. And then we get to know one or both of them.
Mm-hmm.
Or maybe it's an introduction to the school where they're all working at.
Yeah.
It's simply, and then what that really is also showing, introducing us to the peanut gallery, who are also presumably teachers or administration. I love the way they film it with the rolling sofa.
Yeah.
I love it. So, and they still have their mugs of tea because they're on tea break. I love it so much.
Or in that incredibly tiny cramped space with the beetle nut guy that they're just peeking through the curtains.
Yes. So again, like it is a very useful genre to use to tell a bigger story that is not necessarily in that genre. But it's a very approachable toe dip way into, for instance, getting to know more about all four of these characters. And that is one of the things I liked about it. Also, let's be perfectly honest. Almost everybody has been on some sort of date in their life, even if it's a friendship date, and definitely have opinions. It made me laugh.
They showed how much they are friends.
Yes.
That they know what he is trying to show himself to be, and so they're like, so you brown it up a bit, they're just encouraging with they know him. They're not in any way being derogatory with their phrasing. They know this is how he identifies and what he thinks, so they are repeating his own phrases to him.
There's a lot more than 15%.
I was gonna say, within 10 years, white will be a minority in the U.S.
Yeah. Yeah. So I think it's more like 40% are non-white.
And like it's going up because white people are reproducing less because it's not in anyone's economic interest.
Mm-hmm. That's true. So that was like the things that I felt as far as plot devices and storytelling tropes definitely worked. So it was helpful to have the two friends there in order to allow our main character to give commentary, to better explain his thought process without it simply being internal monologue. And it to be sort of jovial, like we're not expecting this to be when someone is telling a story to someone else in the story. So it's a story within a story. We are not expecting things to be 100% factual. Like we understand that when people tell us stories, that they're not what I would call 100% reliable narrative.
Yeah.
People omit things whether they intended to or they accidentally omitted details. People omit details in a story. It's just how it is when they tell us a story. They're going to give us the highlights, not the play-by-play. And so that's what he does. He's giving his friends the highlights of the date. He's not giving a play-by-play, even though as a character, he's portraying this as a play-by-play. So, because like they actually didn't talk that, he only said a few things that they talked about over their meal. A meal would be longer. A meal, they would have to be talking about several more subjects to fill up the time. So it's very obvious that there's some things he's omitting.
Yeah.
Because it's not an exhaustive story about everything they did and everything they talked about. And that is very helpful. So, again, there are ways you can use it. And I would really recommend that if you have not written a short story or even a scene like this, to practice this particular plot device where you have one character tell one or two other characters about something that happened the previous night or the previous week, or a story from the first character's family or something, and have them do that to have this interaction. Because when you reread it, can you figure out how to edit it where it's not confusing to the reader who's like, wait, who's in what story? So so if I say to Tom, do you want to hear how there's chili on the ceiling? Do you want me to tell you of the story of how chili got on the ceiling today?
Go on.
Okay, so there I was making chili for dinner, and I also had the baked potatoes in the oven to bake because I thought we would have chili and baked potatoes. Chili cheese baked potatoes, right? That was what I said I was gonna make. Should I wait, Tom?
Go on. I'm just going to go quickly pull up the last American census.
Well, like I was trying to show how two characters are telling a story about a different situation, and it doesn't work if you're not interacting. It's not really
okay.
Hence, you've missed all of that. And it's like, should I wait? Y'all seem busy.
It was just truly a 15% people of color. Like, in what universe?
In what country? Canada? No. I don't know.
Okay, I'll pull up American census later. But yeah, say go on, continue.
So everything was going just fine. I had the meat browned. I had the cans of tomatoes. I had opened them and they were waiting. I was adding the spices so they could toast a little because, I like toasted cumin. Everything was going well. I then, added the tomatoes and I put the lid on for it to simmer, turn the heat down. Everything was good, right? Everything is fine. Tom, I have to tell you, after about 40 minutes or so, the house smelled divine. There I was, grating cheese. Everything was going well. I check it. It's great. It's starting to accumulate a little on the bottom. I was concerned it was going to brown, the chili was going to brown a little too much on the bottom. So I turned the heat down, but it's not getting better. So I took it off the heat and I was just moving it over to the other burner for a minute when I heard the sound behind me. I guess what happened was it was like several cats having a disagreement over a garbage can outside, but it sounded like it was literally in the house. Like raccoons or cats had dropped in, and I thought for a second I had left the window open above the sink. So I was still holding the chili when I was about to put it down, and I turned, and I guess I turned, and it like touched the pot, touched my arm, and in just its shock, I dropped it, and it like fell on the floor. But then the chili went up, and it went all the way to the ceiling, and then it went everywhere.
The chili fountain of doom. How much did you save? Any of the chili?
I could curse those damn animals. Well, luckily, some of the chili fell back in the pot, so that was theatrical.
I was gonna say, do we still have chili for tonight, though?
We have just enough. Just enough to survive. It's shaken chili, though. Just want you to know that.
No kidding.
It's shaken chili, like shaken beef.
I mean, I assume you are healthy and okay.
You
don't seem to have gone to the hospital.
I have put a burn pad on, and it is cooling, and I have changed clothes. This is not what I started with. But now, and I have done a whole lot of cleaning and maybe a little crying as I wiped up half a pot of chili off of the floor. But I just want you to know, it turns out I'm very short. And even when I stand on a chair, I cannot quite reach the ceiling.
But the floor is clean, and that's what
my
matters.
chili of shame off of the ceiling.
It's the commentary chili. Yeah.
So,
but the floor looks nice. You know, I see, you know, made sure to actually, you know, mop it as well.
I look up, I think about those damn animals arguing over garbage can outside.
That's because they smelled the chili too, and they wanted it. That's what happens when you leave the window open. You know how Cassie and the other pets used to get about your chili?
It does win Super Bowls.
Yes, it does.
And scene. So, again, while it's obvious two people are having a conversation about something that is not currently happening, when you put it in print, it can be a little bit more challenging to make sure the reader does not confuse which parts are in the past and which parts are in the immediate present.
And the peanut gallery definitely does help that.
Mm-hmm.
Also, it shows that just because you're in a genre like romance doesn't mean you cannot use other conventions from other genres, and that it can't, you know, it integrates just fine into a story. Like, I did not find the peanut gallery distracting from the romance aspect of the story.
Mm-hmm.
If anything, it helped infer and actually sometimes literally say what was his inner monologue that we normally wouldn't get in that kind of story.
Without third-person omniscient. It is a way to do it without using third-person omniscient. It is actually one of the very few ways. But third-person omniscient as a storytelling voice does not always feel appropriate, particularly in contemporary style stories. So this is a way to get, like, I guess it's like 3.25 omniscient.
Believe me, I was very surprised when I was looking it up and I realized that the Rules of Magic was written and published in the last decade, because it has that third person omniscient. Mm-hmm. Well, actually, hers is more. It goes back between omniscient and limited.
Third person limited is different, but that's what he's actually giving. He's giving third person limited in a way that does not actually feel awkward because we know who he's talking to. He is not talking to us, the reader or the audience. He is talking to the peanut gallery sitting on the other sofa drinking their cups of tea. By the way, Maggie, thank you very much. This actually happened several years ago. How long ago did it happen? Cassie was there and she got covered in chili.
Happiest day of her life.
She was so happy. Some of
know,
it landed on her, and I thought she would be burned. I'm like, oh no, Cassie. She was not burnt at all.
how does the little piggy go? Oink, oink.
She was like, finally heaven. And then she started licking the cabinets because some of it, anyway, yeah. Yes, fountain of
I believe that was how you raced to clean because you didn't want her just
licking my dirty cabinets.
Yeah.
It's like the upper cabinets I can wipe down easily, but the lower ones, in my back, yeah.
And she's just having that look of like, I'm going to get to it first.
So she was covered in chili. I had to bathe the dog. She was trying to reach and hurting herself, trying so. Megan says Princess once splashed spaghetti sauce all over the ceiling and inside the ceiling vent. When she knocked a bowl of pasta off the counter, it made such a, oh my gosh. So, no, I did not actually get burnt that time either. And to be perfectly honest, we have actually left. We got the chili off of all of the ceiling except the light fixture. Tom demanded that we leave it there as a monument, as a reminder that gravity is not the boss of us. So there's like one little spot on the lighting fixture. And then once when we had somebody come in, we thought the lighting fixture, it's a fluorescent lighting fixture, we thought it was broken. It turned out it needed the little starter bit needed to be replaced. And the handyman offered to clean the chili spot off of the lighting vent cover. And Tom was like, no, leave it. And then he explained it to Mr. Rex why. And Mr. Rex agreed, let us leave the spot, the chili spot. So it's a conspiracy.
But yeah, if anything, it's like, I wonder if Cassie set those cats up of like, she was so thrilled.
Yeah, I'm glad the pot didn't land on her because she was standing right next to it where it landed. I just remember her going, did you cover me in chili? Just licking everything. Just, oh my God.
It's like my dream has actually come true.
Yes.
Leave me. I will clean this up.
Let me take care of this, Mummy. No. Also, the floor was dirty. I didn't want her licking all of that. Like, yeah.
She was very upset that you took her away.
Oh, she was so mad at me. She was mad. She was so mad at me.
She's like, no, if it lands on the floor, it's mine.
Right.
This is how we have divided up this room.
She was the dirtiest looks I got when I put her in the bathtub to wash her. Dirtiest looks.
No, I get to clean myself.
This is not fair. This is a revolution. Like,
yes. But yeah, with 2 doses, we really get to, we see some very unconventional methods to get the information to us. And again, there is no bad guy. There's no villain in this story.
Mm-mm.
It's not even, this guy who's having a hard time coping with essentially you're not the proudest person in the room.
And that Vinay is not really in a love triangle here. Vinay is not the other person he's competing against for her attention.
Like she's already stated, he's out of the picture. It's just in his own head.
Mm-hmm.
And so it makes for this really entertaining story.
Mm-hmm.
as he keeps trying to cope. And as soon as he's like, okay, I've got my bearings again. I know how to roll with this. Another, obstacle gets thrown up, and we see him again unsettled.
And that is how we can put conflict in without it being like destroying conflict or violence. All conflict does not need to be violence. Conflict is simply you have a character with a stated expectation, and then that does not happen. And then how that character reacts. And then the character then regroups. And then they go, okay, then we're going to do this. And this is and then they state their expectation. And then that is not how it goes. So you can keep rolling conflict and keep a story moving forward without having violence, without even having anybody say anything negative. Because if you recall, in this story, in the original events that happened, this guy is simply retelling it. But in the original events, nobody is saying anything negative to our storyteller. Not his date, not any of the other people, like at the restaurant or at the second location. Nobody's saying anything negative to anybody. So you can have conflict without anybody being negative. Because I agree, I don't like all that negativity. Sometimes I am not in the mood for that sort of thing. It is not necessary for anyone to be negative or violent, and yet you can still have conflict moving a story forward to its conclusion or to its continuation into another chapter.
Nor even at the very beginning do we see a real negative look from the woman.
The
in
only
the present.
time she seems disappointed when he talks about how he's not good for travel, since she's already stated how she really enjoyed travel, and she looks a little. And when he's feeling sick after the beetle net, which again I can absolutely relate to. Of like, I have now made my date sick. He's vomited on a date. I have messed this up. Like that is how I would feel. So I definitely could relate to her face of, great, I just messed this up. And so she doesn't know what to do other than, let's get you home. It's a school night and I don't want to make this worse. So yeah. But is that the end of the story? Are we leaving it on a downer? Absolutely not. Because we have our peanut gallery to save this story of, okay, so what you're looking for is right. So they're still moving forward. And so
they're not letting him dwell as much as we can tell. He kind of wants to dwell on all the negatives. They're like, go on though, but that wasn't the end of the night. What happened next?
Mm-hmm. So, well, even at the end where she's like, let's get you home. That's what I'm saying. Like, we're not ending on a sour note, because the peanut gallery is like, okay, so what you're looking for in a woman is somebody who's looking for what you bring to the table.
Mm-hmm.
An Indian guy who enjoys cutlery and mild doses. Yeah.
Again, they're not upset at him either.
No. They don't want him to be anything else. They're not trying to do a makeover. But just, what are we looking for here in a person, so we know what to keep our eye out for, presumably.
But we see at the very beginning of this short that she does not give him a negative look when she comes into the, what do you call
restaurant.
that place? The teachers.
Oh yeah, we see her, and she smiles at him.
Yeah, she's like, it was fine. Like, no, this is probably not going to work for dating, but it was an adventurous evening.
Right. This was not a disaster.
And so that's the other part we know, is that since it's a retelling, we know from her expression, no matter what he says, this wasn't the worst thing in the world.
Mm-hmm.
And so we're also trying to reconcile what we saw at the very beginning with what happens.
So that's why he says conflict within oneself and with one's own baggage, or the goggles they see the world through, is awesome. Yes. Like, he essentially butted up against his own expectations. He obviously had some preconceived notions about her and about, like, the culture he believes he's living in. So we're now seeing how he defines the culture he lives within.
And we kind of get a sense that it's because of the culture his father told him they live in.
Mm-hmm.
That, like, these are the expectations he has grown up with.
Yes.
And he has not reevaluated it now that he's an adult of, all right, did everything my parents tell me hold up now that I'm experiencing it for myself?
Mm-hmm.
He's just taken it as fact instead of going, all right, but how much were they just saying that because that's what they thought at the time?
Also, for the record, if you've never had doses, they are freaking awesome.
Mm-hmm.
Oh my goodness, they are delicious. They're so good. I wish I had a better blender.
Mm.
They are so good. If you like crepes, buckle up, kiddos, because you're gonna love doses. I mean, they're not exactly like crepes, but like, you know, they're definitely distant cousins. I would say that. So, so yeah, I love anything with food. So anyhow, my point just being, there's several plot devices and tropes that you can use both in romances with this that are used in the story, as well as just in other genre stories, other kinds of stories, period, including contemporary. So Cherry says, this reminds me of Quentin from the Magicians, except in that they show the problems with blaming others for his own shortcomings. No matter what good happens, he is always miserable. It does help show, like, we learn a lot about this main character in his retelling, because we're seeing this through his eyes, but we are seeing what happens where he has expectations, and then when he encounters reality, and then we see him regroup, and then new expectations, but does he really adjust his expectations?
I mean, but we see it even at the very beginning of him going, okay, it wasn't such a good idea for me to start at the corner, because then I have to, have this conversation while we're walking to the restaurant as well, of like, maybe I set myself up for a bit more than is my skill. And we see, like, just how much all of this was planned out with a lot of expectations on his part, and every time she subverts them. And he doesn't know how to roll with it.
So we get to know a lot about him. And technically, there is plenty of exposition in this story, since he's the one telling it and then his friends are commenting. But it doesn't feel like the kind of laborious exposition.
It's not an info dump exposition.
Right.
It is at least a conversational exposition, as they each pump each other for more information.
So that is a way you can get a lot of information out while having two or more characters talk to each other, and it not feel like it's just an info dump. It's just two random characters saying things to each other, but instead have them actually interview each other. So then what happened?
Kind of like we see in that first short with Orange is Bliss. Is again, we have two characters chatting each other up about current events, about this, this MacGuffin of how it works and what the expectations are.
What I would suggest, even if let's say you have a character that you've been writing for a while, you're very comfortable with this character, you feel like you really know them, have this character talk to another character to tell the second character something about the first character's background by way of a story about their childhood, a story about any experience. You could have them tell a story about going grocery shopping, frankly. And have them do that and see how that goes. Try this exercise where you are having character one, the one that you're very familiar with, you're very comfortable with, have them do a retelling of some adventure to a secondary character, and have them both interact. See what kind of exposition just naturally comes out. The secondary character is going to have questions about the story as the story unfolds. Nobody just sits there and go, 20 minutes later. Nobody does that in real life, so your character should not either. Both characters should be having an active conversation, or at least a semi-active conversation, as character one tells a story about something else from their past, be it yesterday, last week, their childhood, whatever. But something, anything, any story. And see what happens, what they roll out. It is a way to sneak a lot of exposition in without having to actually necessarily write out the scenes, because one of the shortcuts you can use is character two will say, why did you do this? Why did you, buy, you said you're allergic to beans. Why did you go buy, canned chickpeas? Oh, because it's the only thing my cat will eat. What? How do you have a cat that only eats beans, chickpeas specifically, when you don't eat beans? How did that happen? Okay, Like, the secondary character is going to have a conversation. They're actually going to be sometimes asking for clarification and so on. And you can get a lot of things in that normally you would have to do an info dump or something, or maybe you caught yourself desiring to do an info dump to explain the background of your character.
And part of it is always like, like this, of where you have a lot of enticing elements that, will then be interested in finding out the origins of. Maggie's little, my daughter's
Did I ever tell you why my daughter's never allowed to eat spaghetti from a plate again? No, tell me this story. How did this happen? Well, ... But
I just mean, like, even this actual sentence she wrote of, not allowed from the spaghetti after she dumped it on the white chihuahua and dyed him tomato orange. It's like, okay, what led to dumping it on the chihuahua? Why was the chihuahua there? Why, what was the spaghetti like, how was there that much sauce? Like, what led up to this? It's a very good opener.
Mm-hmm.
To then, essentially, if you want to do an info dump about that may be important later on in the story of, like, the daughter maybe doesn't have the best coordination, but she really likes sauces and soups. So, we try to make sure she always has, the right tools to eat, or something like that. It's a way to tell other information without having to just info dump about something.
Mm-hmm.
Tell a cute story or a ridiculous story or you ain't gonna believe this. I mean, but really, you want to find out what led to the orange chihuahua that used to
Why
be white.
is your chihuahua orange? I don't remember you having an orange chihuahua, Maggie. I thought you had, white and brown chihuahuas. Oh. Okay, settle in. I'm going to tell you how, Frank the chihuahua became orange last week. Right? Something. Try it out with your characters and see what happens. Write out the whole scene, put it aside for a week, then come back with an eye toward editing and revising so that it is clearer who is speaking and what is in the past versus what is in the present. Because you're juggling two different time periods in one story. You're juggling the past and you're juggling the present conversation. And sometimes some folks have a difficulty in clarifying this in their story. So that's why you need to put it aside for a week. And then once you've, sufficiently forgotten enough of it, you then reread it with fresh eyes and edit it, like read it and make notes for any time the time period slides.
And also you can always, if, again, if you don't have another, for whatever reason, you don't have a second character there, you can have them react to the environment. So again, like we saw in Orange is Bliss, we saw a whole lot of info shown to us in the form of, sheets of paper with print on it on the boards, on the bulletin boards with, big bold lines of like settling for blue. So we get a sense that it's not just green and orange we're dealing with. There are other colors that are less ideal even than that, and what people's views on it by simply the phrasing. And then, but your character in your writing, you could simply have your character notice a bulletin board and react to something written on there as a way to get the information in the story earlier on, so you don't have a hat pull later. Of that, this convention is already established in your universe. The sadness of being a blue match. Is it really worth matching even if you're blue? Like,
Orange couples getaways. I mean, it is a trope or device that used to be used quite a bit more than it is now. It was often, bye y'all. It is often, it was used a lot in the 80s and 70s stories where you'd go check, you could have a character go to the laundromat and read the bulletin board while they wash their laundry. And it would, and what was on the bulletin board would tell the reader quite a bit about that world of, oh, there's suddenly a whole lot of missing dogs.
I say, and it does have to be a bulletin board. People still post up signs on just, lamp posts and trash bins and, on the, beside the door to a, store.
I gotta be honest, a lot of coffee shops still have bulletin boards.
I mean, there's signage everywhere.
Mm-hmm.
And you can always have your characters react to that as a way to get the information in there without having to just resort to just a plain obvious info dump, which is always a bit awkward. It takes your reader out of the moment. Megan, points out, also the classic using the Nextdoor app, yes, or Facebook, or any of the other neighborhood groups,
mm-hmm,
or just advertising, message post on his social media. There's just so many ways, but you can just have your character react to it as a way to get the information in there. Or there is always, Gloria and I's, we still enjoy the trope of the dictionary entry from Hitchhiker's Guide and such. Of just a true aside, a footnote. Terry, I think Pratchett did it as well, didn't he?
The dictionary thing?
No, the footnote.
Pratchett abused the footnote option. Like the most gratuitous footnotes. If a footnote lasts 3 pages...
Is it still a footnote?
Is it a footnote? I mean, there are no rules anymore anyway, so just
of just whatever way seems fun and interesting.
But I mean, a footnote is not exactly the same as like reacting to a bulletin board.
No, but it's a way to get, but it's just different ways to get the information out there versus it always, info dumps get such a bad rep because it's laborious. There's nothing interactive. There's nothing, they're just teaching you real quick. We don't see the purpose in there. It's not an aside. There's no fun in it. It's just factual. That's why info dumps get the bad rep they get.
Mm-hmm.
Versus we want our characters to have agency. That's what we're looking for in all of our stories, is how do you maintain agency of your characters? And the whole show don't tell has sort of been misunderstood, just like the whole, kill your darlings. It's more of, it's not kill your darling. It's not like a requirement that you kill the things you like in your story. It's the do not hold your darlings precious, and change the story around them. Let them exit the story when they need to exit the story. It's not the, no, if you love your character that much, you need to kill them. That's psychotic. No.
Eva. Yeah, like
My
I have met
firstborn, I
more than
love you so much. This is why I have brought you out here to the sacrificing altar.
I have met more than a few writers who genuinely believed that the advice was to actually kill your favorite characters. And it was like, no, that is not, no. No, no.
Your
Also,
reader is not your deity.
like, or show don't tell, that you have to just write an incredible amount of descriptive text. Don't tell them, like, you can just have a character say, wow, I noticed on the way in the grocery store there's a heck of a lot of missing dog signs. Like, is nobody caring about the cats, or is it just the dogs going missing? What is happening? Is somebody making a coat? Are we in 1001 Dalmatians? Like, you can just have a character say that to another character. Again, they are showing, they're having a conversation, and the other character goes, I've noticed that too.
They're active.
You can have a secondary character say, I have noticed that as well, and I started wondering too. So, I've literally actually had this conversation with a grocery store cashier where I'm like, what is up with all the missing dog things? And she said to me, this is true. She said, I noticed that too. It's been about 2 weeks that we've started noticing extra missing dog reports, signs up. So I've started telling the kids to bring the dog in every night, because if somebody's out there stealing dogs, I don't need to deal with crying children. So, and I'm like, how big's your dog? And she said, he a biggin. And I was like, how big is a biggin? Like a basset hound? And she said, no. Like a German Shepherd and a Great Dane had a good time. And I was like, oh, you're right. He is a biggin. Like, there's a reason I used to keep him outside. But if somebody's coming into people's backyards, because he's gated, but what if we don't lock the gate? And I keep finding the kids leaving the gate open. He never leaves. He's such a good dog. But if somebody's taking dogs, so we bring him in at night, which he does not want. But I mean, thankfully he doesn't pee inside, but still, like, I don't want to do that. So, like, that was the conversation I had while she checked out my groceries. Let's see. Megan says Cornelia Funke or Funk killed her darlings in her favorite children's series. I was very upset about it as a kid.
Versus, Eva.
If death is the risk
Bloodthirsty.
in the
Bloodthirsty.
in the conflict for a character, no one ever dies. I'm bored. Haha, I killed the. Gotta save the world, but no one actually dies. So even if you mess up, all is well. Not a great plot outside of children's stories. Eva's so mean. Murder. So, like, that's, as I said, you don't have to, like, show if you're like, I do not want to write descriptive text if she's reading all the signs on the bulletin board at the grocery store of all these missing dogs. You can just have her, she read through the bulletin board and then went on to, buy produce, and checked out and saw her favorite cashier, Jenny, and was like, hey, Jenny, hey, how's it going? And then, so, are there suddenly a whole lot of missing dogs? Do I not understand? And she's like, I noticed that too. And have a quick conversation amid the beeping.
I mean, and you can have the character notice either all the dogs seem to be similar size, or there seems to be no pattern at all to all these dogs. Why are they all missing? This seems weird. Usually, you think if it was someone in particular, they'd be going for a type. Why is it every dog?
And, by the way, every conversation your character has with another character does not have to lead to something in the plot. Sometimes you can use it as an illustration, particularly if it's not too long. You can have it lead to better knowing characters, better seeing our character out in the world. Y'all.
You think she's joking, but no, she totally will accept postage too. Send me the tears.
So It is now. You may eventually delete that conversation, or like not delete, but edit out that conversation in one of your final edits if you feel like it's interrupting flow. But I think it's a useful and handy exercise to do. Number one, to get used to your characters having other non-plot related conversations, as well as helping better world building by showing this is a world where dogs keep disappearing. What is this about? It's nothing as big as Agent Mayhem. Is that what you're trying to say? You gonna get him that saddle, Sam? Or a little harness so he can pull a tiny little carriage filled with the Chi Nation?
Let's say, is he gonna end up being like what was that dog at your former in-laws up in Vermont?
Oh, the Mastiff? Yeah, I don't think so. He not
You
gonna
know, where
be
you accidentally slide your entire foot in his mouth without
so good.
realizing.
I didn't realize, and he was so sweet, such a sweet dog that he was like, I don't know, I did, no, but I was right. Like, so fun. So, like, that is what I am suggesting, is to try some of these exercises out. Number one, so you know that you did it. You can say, I know how to do that. And number two, to see how it goes, so that you do have that familiarity in case you end up using it at another time in a plot that makes sense for
But
you.
also, like, those conversations, sometimes it's not the conversation that's the point. It's just showing, oh, maybe this character is friends with this checkout person, that, you know, they've known them for some period of time. You know, maybe it's not about what they're saying, just that they're interacting.
Mm-hmm. As well as, let's be honest, and they are talking about the world they live in.
Yeah.
It is world building.
Mm-hmm.
But speaking of all sorts of random conversations, next week we will do, a year later, maybe slightly more than a year, we will do Kevin Smith Part 2.
The 2000s.
Just the 2000s decade. So this will include, in theory, I don't know, we're going to, okay, in theory, we're going to talk about Jay and Silent Bob, the original one, Jersey Girl, don't groan at me, Clerks 2, and Zach and Miri Make a Porno. Charlie, in theory, will be joining us because they cannot resist us talking about Kevin Smith without them. No, I'm kidding. We would love to have them there, because we did Kevin Smith Part 1 where we only made it through the 90s. So we'll see how far we get in this one, and that will determine how far we get in Part 3. Maggie says, or the cashier asks if she has a dog, and then says, be sure you keep it safe. Someone took my neighbor's dog. Exactly. Yeah, you can have a red herring conversation, but it still shows world building.
I mean, like, if you want to see a great case in point of how you use those red herrings to build up questions, on Hulu, Only Murders in the Building, like, you know, really went through showing you all these tropes and how you build up a mystery using this.
Mm-hmm.
And where even red herrings can eventually lead back to explaining about characters and backgrounds and more information. You just didn't realize it was pertinent in this way. You think it's pertinent in a very different way.
So anyway, I hope that you'll all be able to join us next Monday for Kevin Smith Part 2. If you would like to join us on screen, please let me know so I can be sure to include your picture, all and your links, all that good stuff. And if not, you could also just surprise guest. It's cool too. Because yay, Kevin Smith. So much talking. I mean, his scripts are legendary for how many pages of just straight talking.
So much dialogue.
So much talking. It's fantastic.
Here, let me do my impression of Lord of the Rings.
So yes, that's what we'll be doing next week as we go back and forth. We do an episode about short films, And then we do an episode about long films, like regular length films. And we're going back and forth, in order to talk about various kinds of storytelling. Is it more than Gilmore Girls? You mean the talking? Apparently, yes. That is what I've been told. That at least among films, Kevin Smith has one of the highest word counts per minute.
Yeah, his scripts are usually a minimum of twice as long as most movie scripts for the time it will be.
So in fact, like actors are like apparently, supposedly, I don't know if this is true, but supposedly some of the actors have had to be trained to talk a little faster. Like what was it? Ben Affleck and Matt Damon had to be reminded during Dogma of, my dude, come on, you're talking too slow. We have to get through the scene. And so like you've got to be snappy about it. So it's definitely more like 1930s and 40s rom-com comedy speed talking. So yes. So thank you all so much for coming. If you are still here, congratulations to you. You've made it. If you are rewatching on your own schedule, please let us know your thoughts in the comments. We definitely read them all. And, all the things like subscribe, ring the notification bell, become a member. I don't know. The things. Did you know we have links down below to all sorts of stuff?
Enjoy.
Yes, we will be in the Discords, our Discord server, Unicorn Council Discord in the clubhouse after the show, after I have a potty break. So we will see y'all there in a few minutes for those who want to hang out and do all the things, y'all. And happy Valentine's Day. And tomorrow, happy Galentine's Day. You're great. We love you. We do this for you. We hope you're enjoying it. Thank you for the feedback, y'all. Bye-bye.
Bye.